Chapter 138, The Vanished General's Mansion, Murong Li's Decree. If that's really the case, then the general's residence probably made preparations long ago. Order the imperial capital to be sealed off. I don't want to see anyone from the general's residence escape the imperial capital. Murong Li, knowing the current situation of the general's residence, spoke with a gloomy expression to the eunuch in front of him. Your subject obeys. After hearing Murong Li's words, eunuch Wang quickly left, relieved in his heart. Imperial brother, your subject and younger brother request permission to apprehend those from the general's residence. Below, Prince Zhao's eyes flashed with a golden light after hearing Murong Li's words. Then he cupped his hands towards Murong Li on the imperial throne and said, Go show no mercy. Murong Li waved his hand at Prince Zhao after hearing his words, his eyes filled with intense killing intent. Your subject and younger brother obeys. Prince Zhao also quickly left the imperial palace after hearing Murong Li's words. Soon, Prince Zhao led a team and began searching the imperial capital. At this time, all the common people and cultivators in the imperial capital knew about the disappearance of the general's residence. They had not expected the general's residence to vanish completely overnight, as if it had never appeared. However, at this time, the entire imperial capital was sealed off, so these common people and cultivators naturally did not dare to run around. After all, who knew if they would be considered traitors of the general's residence and be executed? Yang Tianzhan. Yang Tianzhan, I didn't expect you old fellow to have already defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Do you really think that with the Prince of Jinbei's estate's foundation, it can defeat the great Yan imperial family? In this chaotic imperial capital, Long Zizai, another great general of the great Yan imperial dynasty, naturally also received news about the general's residence. He looked up at the sky with a distant gaze, a complex expression on his face. No one knew what Long Zizai was thinking at this moment. The Prince of Jinbei's estate has already taken the western and eastern regions, which means that the great Yan imperial family's territory now only consists of the central and southern regions. I'm afraid the final battle is also approaching. After Long Zizai finished speaking, he looked towards the northern region. At this moment, he seemed to have already foreseen the arrival of a world-shaking war. As a great general of the great Yan imperial dynasty, he knew that he could not avoid this great battle. However, unlike Yang Tianzhan, this great general did not hold military power. He had handed over all his military power to the great Yan imperial dynasty several years ago. This was also why Yang Tianzhan was chosen for this expedition, not him. I didn't expect Yang Tianzhan to choose to defect to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. His actions are truly swift. I wonder where the people of the general's residence are now. Could they have been taken away by the people of the Prince of Jinbei's estate? In another residence in the imperial capital, a white-haired old man looked ahead and spoke slowly, his face filled with intense doubt. Clearly, he also did not know the whereabouts of the general's residence's people at this moment. At the same time, he was also curious why Yang Tianzhan had so decisively defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Based on his understanding of Yang Tianzhan would not have joined the Prince of Jinbei's estate so decisively. Alas, what does all this have to do with this old man? After a moment, the old man sighed helplessly, then slowly withdrew his gaze, ignoring the commotion outside. At this time, the imperial capital was plunged into chaos, although their goal was to search for the people of the general's residence. However, these soldiers took advantage of this opportunity to plunder the belongings of the common people, instantly embarrassing the common people, and even many common people died in many places. And these common people and cultivators who had already died were branded with the mark of the general's residence. The days of chaos lasted for 2 days. After 2 days, no one from the general's residence was found, and Prince Zhao and eunuch Wang had no choice but to face Murong Li. After all, in this situation, even if they were given more time, they would not be able to find any news about the general's residence, and it would also bring unrest to the common people and cultivators of the imperial capital. So Prince Zhao and eunuch Wang could only stop the search and come to see Murong Li. Reporting, Imperial brother, the general's residence seems to have completely vanished from the imperial capital without any news. Prince Zhao looked at Murong Li somewhat helplessly and spoke slowly. He originally thought this was a good assignment, but he didn't expect to have searched for so long without finding any news about the general's residence, which immediately made him feel like he had lost face. Reporting, Your Majesty, your subject also has no news about the general's residence. Eunuch Wang also spoke tremblingly to Murong Li, and after finishing, he kept his head bowed low, not daring to look at Murong Li on the imperial throne. Good. It seems Yang Tianzhan had long wanted to defect to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Everything today was within his calculations. I didn't expect my great Yan imperial dynasty to have raised such an ungrateful wretch. Murong Li looked grimly in the direction of the general's residence. At this moment, if he still didn't understand that the general's residence had already left the imperial capital, then he would have been a useless emperor. He hadn't expected Yang Tianzhan to be so capable of hiding, not forgetting to settle the general's residence's affairs even when leading the army away. You two may withdraw. Pass my decree. Any cultivator of my great Yin imperial dynasty who slays an important member of the general's residence may come to the imperial capital to claim a reward. The enraged Murong Li directly spoke to Prince Zhao and eunuch Wang in front of him. After speaking, he waved his hand to the two of them, and his decree immediately spread throughout the entire imperial palace. Prince Zhao and eunuch Wang exchanged glances, then left the palace. At this moment, they did not want to incur Murong Li's wrath. Cough, cough. It wasn't until Prince Zhao and eunuch Wang left that Murong Li slowly collapsed onto the imperial throne. At the same time, he began to cough, and his handkerchief was stained with much blood. Damn Chu Fan. Why is this power so overbearing? Am I really unable to force this power out? Putting away the handkerchief in his hand, Murong Li looked angrily in the direction of the northern region. He hadn't expected the arrow Chu Fan had shot at him to be so potent. He feared that even now, he couldn't force out the power within his body that was damaging his internal organs. He could only rely on his old ancestor to prolong his life. On the other side, after Prince Zhao and eunuch Wang left, they also spread Murong Li's decree throughout the entire imperial capital, and instantly, the entire imperial capital became lively. No one had expected Murong Li to go to such lengths for the general's residence. Of course, at this time, everyone also understood Murong Li's anger, because if he wasn't angry to this extent, Murong Li wouldn't have gone to such lengths. At the same time, many cultivators also began to take action, because for loose cultivators like them, the most important thing was resources, and now, by just killing a member of the general's residence, they could obtain resources they could never have obtained in their lifetime. Loose cultivators like them naturally could not refuse such temptation. Chapter 139: The Shocks Across Dynasties, and the Tianxin Dynasty's Plans. Because of this decree from Murong Li, the entire Great Yin Dynasty was shaken. The events happening within the Great Yin Dynasty quickly spread throughout the other three great dynasties. They had not expected that in the short time since the Heavenly Prodigy battle concluded, the Prince of Jinbei's estate had already seized more than half of the Great Yin Dynasty. More importantly, they never anticipated that the great general of the Great Yin Dynasty would lead his 400,000-strong army and defect to the Prince of Jinbei's estate without any hesitation. It seems my maternal grandson prepared thoroughly. The final decisive battle is probably approaching soon. After receiving the news, Feng Zhan of the Feng family also looked towards the Prince of Jinbei's estate in shock. He had not expected his own maternal grandson to possess such strength. In just over a month, he had taken control of the entire eastern region. One must know that the Prince of Jinbei's estate now controlled the eastern, western, and northern regions. The current strength of the Prince of Jinbei's estate could already rival the Great Yin Dynasty. If Feng Zhan had previously worried about whether the Prince of Jinbei's estate could defeat the Great Yin Dynasty, now he no longer had that concern. After all, the current strength of the Prince of Jinbei's estate had been displayed before him. It could be said that the Prince of Jinbei's estate now possessed the power to fight the Great Yin Dynasty. Moreover, the final victor would likely be the Prince of Jinbei's estate, which was, of course, what made him happiest. If the Prince of Jinbei's estate were to win this great war, then the status of their Feng family would naturally rise accordingly. After all, the only heir of the Prince of Jinbei's estate was his own maternal grandson. On the other side, Yin Xiaotian, the emperor of the Fengyan dynasty, was looking towards the Great Yin Dynasty with a solemn expression. Although he, as the emperor of the Fengyan dynasty, intended to watch the tigers fight from the mountain, he hadn't expected the strength of the Prince of Jinbei's estate to be so terrifying. One should know that even the Fengyan dynasty, the #1 imperial dynasty in the eastern region, would need a certain amount of time to take down the Great Yin Dynasty, and it might even require both sides to suffer heavy losses before the Great Yin Dynasty could be defeated. This was why, despite friction among the imperial dynasties in the eastern region, a true national war had never occurred. After all, even the Fengyan dynasty, as the #1 imperial dynasty in the eastern region, could not easily defeat the Great Yin Dynasty, so a national war was naturally impossible. Could it be that Chu Fan is supported by a force from outside the eastern region? Otherwise, how could the strength of the Prince of Jinbei's estate be so terrifying? Yin Xiaotian began to ponder at this moment, because he refused to believe that the Prince of Jinbei's estate's strength was truly this terrifying. He was currently contemplating which power stood behind Chu Fan. However, no matter how powerful the force behind him is, they wouldn't dare violate the rules of the Heavenly Dao Alliance, right? Yin Xiaotian then slowly cast his gaze toward the central region. As the emperor of the Fengyan dynasty, he naturally knew of the existence of the Heavenly Dao Alliance. This was why he did not fear Chu Fan, even while suspecting that other forces supported him. Even if Chu Fan was backed by a powerful supporting force, they would not allow Chu Fan to act recklessly. After all, the suppression exerted by the Heavenly Dao Alliance was not so easily ignored. Not even the holy lands of the Central Region could suppress the Heavenly Dao Alliance. In fact, the Heavenly Dao Alliance suppressed those holy lands. Now we just have to wait for the final battle between Chu Fan and the Great Yin Dynasty. That will also be the opportunity for my Fengyan Dynasty. Yun Xiaotian began to look forward to this final battle, because this war might be the first step for their Fengyan Dynasty to successfully dominate the Eastern region. As the #1 imperial dynasty in the Eastern region, the Fengyan Dynasty and Yun Xiaotian had always been waiting for an opportunity to unify the entire Eastern region. Although the Mengyuan Dynasty also noticed the events unfolding within the Great Yin Dynasty, the Mengyuan Dynasty currently chose not to intervene in the war between the Great Yin Dynasty and the Prince of Jinbei's estate. After all, the distance between the Mengyuan Dynasty and the Prince of Jinbei's estate, or the Great Yin Dynasty, was quite far. If they wanted to join this great war, they would have to cross the Tianqing Dynasty. But how could the Tianqing Dynasty possibly give them that chance? As for the Tianqing Dynasty on the other side, things were different. At this moment, the emperor of Tianqing Dynasty showed an excited expression upon receiving the news coming from within the Great Yin Dynasty. Regarding the war breaking out between the Prince of Jinbei's estate and the Great Yin Dynasty, no one was happier than him. After all, the Tianqing Dynasty, the Prince of Jinbei's estate, and the Great Yin Dynasty were all embroiled in a generational feud. The fact that his two enemies had now started a major war was naturally the best news for him. I truly didn't expect the war between the Great Yin Dynasty and the Prince of Jinbei's estate to erupt so quickly after the Heavenly Prodigy battle concluded. It seems the opportunity for my Tianqing Dynasty has arrived. The excited emperor of Tianqing Dynasty immediately summoned all the ministers of the Tianqing Dynasty to the main hall. He spoke to the ministers below with an expression full of excitement. At this time, the faces of the ministers below were also filled with excited and thrilled expressions. They seemed to already envision the moment the Tianqing Dynasty successfully defeated the Prince of Jinbei's estate and the Great Yin Dynasty. Your Majesty, this humble general requests permission to fight. An old general slowly stepped forward and spoke to the emperor of Tianqing Dynasty. His face was filled with excitement, and his entire body was trembling from the fervor. Your Majesty, this humble general also requests permission to fight. Following this old general's request to fight, the other generals also stepped forward one after another, excitedly requesting permission to fight from the emperor of Tianqing Dynasty. The emperor of Tianqing Dynasty smiled excitedly upon seeing this scene. In this war, my Tianqing Dynasty is sure to win. However, we need to wait until the Prince of Jinbei's estate and the Great Yin Dynasty truly begin their decisive battle before sending troops. That will be our best moment. However, he quickly restrained the smile on his face and looked solemnly at the crowd below. General Chun, I hereby appoint you as the Grand Marshal to conquer Yin and grant you an army of 1 million. I hope you can seize the entire Great Yin Dynasty for me this time. Following this, the Emperor of Tianqing Dynasty looked towards the old general who had been the first to request battle. His eyes instantly sharpened, and he issued the command to the old general. Your servant will definitely not fail your Majesty's trust. After hearing the words of the Emperor of Tianqing Dynasty, this old general gave a serious guarantee. This old general held a high position in the Tianqing Dynasty, and he was also the longtime rival of Chu Long. He was Chun Xing, the great general of the Tianqing Dynasty. His cultivation had also reached the spirit roaming realm. Over the years, he had constantly engaged in major battles with Chu Long. It could be said that the two had constantly met on the battlefield. However, in recent years, since Chu Long had handed the position of Prince of Jinbei over to Chu Tianxiong, the two had rarely met on the battlefield. Therefore, Chun Xing was very much looking forward to this great war, as it would allow him not only to meet his old rival, but also to fulfill a long-held wish of his. Chapter 140 Wu Tianxi meets Qin Xiong, Wu Tianxi's request. The Emperor of Tianqing Dynasty then turned his gaze towards the other generals. After a long moment, he slowly spoke. As for the rest of the generals, they shall follow Marshal Chun on the campaign. Your subordinates obey. Upon hearing the Emperor of Tianqing Dynasty's command, his generals all bowed to the Emperor of Tianqing Dynasty, their eyes filled with excitement. They were also extremely thrilled about this great war. Following this, the Tianqing Dynasty began preparing the army for the expedition. This time, the Tianqing Dynasty had mobilized an army of 1 million, so the preparation time was not short. Several days passed quickly. During these days, the matters concerning the Great Yin Dynasty and the Prince of Junbei's estate spread throughout the entire eastern region. Everyone was waiting expectantly for the final decisive battle between the Prince of Junbei's estate and the Great Yin Dynasty. It could be said that this great war was enough to change the state of the eastern region. Just as the outside world was abuzz, a woman dressed in Z quietly left the Prince of Junbei's estate. If one looked closely, they would find that this Z woman was none other than Xiao Zi. The reason she had to quietly leave the Prince of Junbei's estate was mainly because the Prince of Junbei's estate was too enthusiastic towards her. She realized that the time she had spent in the Prince of Junbei's estate over the past few days had almost made her gain weight. Xiao Zi glared fiercely in the direction of the Great Yin Dynasty, her little face puffed up, looking extremely adorable. That scoundrel Chu Fan, he dumped this maiden at the Prince of Junbei's estate and just left. When this maiden finds you, you're going to get it. She showed her two small canines and brandished her fists at the air, as if the air before her was utterly heinous. Immediately afterward, Xiao Zi swiftly vanished from the spot, her figure quickly heading towards the eastern region where Chu Fan was located. At this moment, the carefree Chu Fan had no idea that Xiao Zi was already on her way to find him. Concurrently, in the southern region, Qin Xiong and the Yang family army's offensive speed was incredibly fast. In just a few days, they had captured more than half of the southern region. The main reason, of course, was that the defenses of the southern region were weak. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the army led by Qin Xiong and the Yang family army were, they wouldn't have been able to capture most of the southern region so quickly. After nearly half a month of fighting, Qin Xiong's army and the Yang family army also merged. At this moment, smiles were beaming on the faces of Qin Xiong and Yang Yi. Judging by their current speed, they would need at most half a month to capture the entire southern region. By then, they could report back to Chu Fan. Now we only need to push straight through to reach Jinhai City. As long as we deal with Jinhai City, we can completely control the entire southern region. Qin Xiong pointed to the city on the map and slowly spoke to the people inside the tent. Yang Yi, who was beside him, also nodded, because at this point, they didn't need any special plan, they just needed to push forward relentlessly. After all, the southern region's army couldn't stop their advance. The only thing they needed to pay attention to was Jinhai City. They could already start celebrating prematurely. Just ahead of Qin Xiong and the others' army, a figure was constantly sweeping towards their position. If one looked closely, they would find that this person was the Grand General of the South. Grand General of the South. At this moment, the Grand General of the South's face showed a solemn expression. He hadn't expected that during the few days he spent traveling, the Prince of Junbei's estate's army would capture most of the southern region so rapidly. However, he was not worried now. Instead, he headed straight towards Qin Xiong and the others' army alone, as if he wasn't concerned about his own safety. It could be said that the Grand General of the South was extremely confident in his cultivation. Qin Xiong and the others, who were observing the southern region map inside the military camp, naturally noticed a wave of qi approaching their position. A cultivator of the spirit roaming realm. I imagine it must be someone from the Wu family. After sensing this qi, Qin Xiong slowly spoke to Yang Yi and the others beside him. However, he was also curious about why someone from the Wu family would come here. After all, they were currently enemies. When Luo Cheng sensed this qi, a hint of killing intent also appeared on his face, as the incoming person was their enemy. The Grand General of the South did not hide his presence. In just a moment, he appeared outside the camp of Qin Xiong and the others. I asked that the commander of the Prince of Junbei's estate step out for a meeting. Standing outside the tent, he shouted towards Qin Xiong and the others inside. His voice quickly spread throughout the entire military camp. The soldiers who were about to rest immediately reacted and began gathering towards this area. All soldiers retreat. Sensing the soldiers gathering towards them, Qin Xiong's voice also resonated throughout the entire military camp. A mere cultivator of the spirit roaming realm was not worth such a reaction from them. After Qin Xiong's voice fell, he slowly walked out of the tent with Yang Yi and the others. As soon as Qin Xiong and the others emerged, they saw the Grand General of the South standing before them. Seeing Qin Xiong and the others step out, a look of solemnity appeared on the Grand General of the South's face. At this moment, he realized that the qi emanating from Qin Xiong and the others was in no way inferior to his. This meant that the cultivation of these few people before him had all reached the spirit roaming realm, and some even gave the Grand General of the South a feeling that he couldn't see through them. I presume your excellency is the Grand General of the South. Grand General of the South. Qin Xiong looked at the Grand General of the South before him and slowly spoke. Qin Xiong still held some admiration for the Grand General of the South. Grand General of the South. After all, although the Grand General of the South, Grand General of the South, was a great general of the Great Yin Dynasty. His loyalty was not to the Great Yin Dynasty, but to the common people, or rather, to the entire southern region. That is correct. I'm the Grand General of the South. May I ask how this general is addressed? Seeing that Qin Xiong did not show much hostility toward him, the Grand General of the South slowly cupped his hands toward Qin Xiong and spoke. Qin Xiong of the Prince of Zhenbei's estate. Luo Cheng of the Prince of Zhenbei's estate. Yang Yi of the Prince of Zhenbei's estate. After the Grand General of the South finished speaking, Qin Xiong and the others also introduced themselves one after another, and before introducing themselves, they all added the 4 words Prince of Zhenbei's estate. Greetings, generals. This time I have come hoping to ask the generals to withdraw your troops. I, the Grand General of the South, guarantee that the southern region will not be hostile to the Prince of Zhenbei's estate. The Grand General of the South was also the type of military commander who did not resort to schemes or tricks. He immediately stated his purpose. It is impossible for us to withdraw our troops. If this general does not capture the southern region, it will be difficult for this general to report back to the young master. Furthermore, without the southern region, can an imperial dynasty still be considered an imperial dynasty? Qin Xiong greatly admired the Grand General of the South's character, but at this moment, it was impossible for him to withdraw the troops. After all, if he didn't capture the southern region, how could he report back to Chu Fan? Moreover, the southern region was originally part of the Great Yin Dynasty's territory. Chapter 141 The Demand for Surrender. Wu Tianxi was shocked. Luo Cheng and the others nodded after hearing General Qin's words, because none of them could withdraw their troops. General Qin should know the situation in this general southern region. If General Qin insists on attacking the southern region, then the Xi clan will benefit. At that time, the entire Zhenhai city, and even the entire southern region, will become playthings of the Xi clan. Grand General of the South naturally knew that his words alone could not make General Qin and the others retreat. So, he sighed helplessly and then continued to speak to General Qin. In fact, it wasn't that Grand General of the South feared General Qin or the army of the Prince of Zhenbei's estate, but rather that Zhenhai city truly could not afford a major battle at this time. Otherwise, regardless of whether the army of the Prince of Zhenbei's estate won or his, Grand General of the South's army won, they would both be unable to withstand the Xi demon's attack. A mere Xi clan. How could this general's Prince of Zhenbei's estate possibly fear them? General Qin had naturally heard of the Xi clan's existence, but he didn't take the Xi clan outside Zhenhai City to heart. Instead, he said with disdain, although General Qin admired Grand General of the South's actions, those Xi clan were still too weak for him. After all, the strongest among the Xi clan was only one Xi emperor, which meant the Xi clan only had one Dharma aspect realm existence. Their Prince of Zhenbei's estate now had dozens of Dharma aspect realm existences. So how could they possibly fear this so-called Xi emperor? The Xi clan possesses one Xi emperor and dozens of Xi kings. Even if the Prince of Zhenbei's estate's strength is formidable, it would still be difficult to resist the Xi emperor, especially if the Prince of Zhenbei's estate has to fight this general's Wu family before resisting the Xi emperor. Grand General of the South frowned after hearing General Qin's words, and then continued to speak to General Qin. Although General Qin's disdain for the Xi clan was somewhat insulting to him, Grand General of the South considered that General Qin simply didn't know the true Xi clan, so he didn't bother arguing with General Qin. If we can deal with the Xi clan, General Wu, will you pledge allegiance to this general's Prince of Zhenbei's estate? General Qin suddenly thought of something at this moment, and then he looked at Grand General of the South in front of him and asked. In fact, General Qin greatly admired Grand General of the South. If such a person could pledge allegiance to the Prince of Zhenbei's estate, General Qin believed his young master would definitely be very happy. And more importantly, if Grand General of the South pledged allegiance to the Prince of Zhenbei's estate, then they would not have to continue fighting and could take over the entire southern region. Therefore, for General Qin, securing Grand General of the South was a very good way to resolve the battle. It is very difficult to deal with the Xi clan. The Great Yin Imperial family once sent 3 Dharma aspect realm experts, but even so, they did not completely eliminate the Xi clan because these Xi clan are very cunning. When they can't win, they stay in the Xi, but when they have an opportunity, they will come out. Grand General of the South frowned even more after hearing General Qin's words, and then spoke to General Qin. Of course, he didn't directly state that the Prince of Zhenbei's estate couldn't deal with the Xi clan. Instead, he subtly told General Qin that the Xi clan was very difficult to handle. What this general wants to ask General Qin is, as long as this general's Prince of Zhenbei's estate can deal with the Xi clan, will you pledge allegiance to this general's Prince of Zhenbei's estate? General Qin only needs to answer this general's question. General Qin naturally understood Grand General of the South's meaning, so he questioned Grand General of the South again, looking at him with anticipation in his eyes. As long as General Qin can deal with the Sea Clan, this general, Grand General of the South, will lead the entire southern region to pledge allegiance to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Grand General of the South also spoke seriously and solemnly to General Qin after hearing his statement. This general has remembered what General Wu said. This general hopes General Wu will not go back on his word then. General Qin nodded with satisfaction after hearing Grand General of the South's words, and then he slowly walked forward and spoke to Grand General of the South. This general, Grand General of the South, can swear before the entire southern region that as long as General Qin can deal with the Sea Clan, this general will pledge allegiance to General Qin. Grand General of the South stepped forward and guaranteed with conviction after hearing General Qin's words. Good. Then this general asked General Wu to lead the way. We will go and meet the so-called Sea Clan now. General Qin smiled after hearing Grand General of the South's guarantee, and then waved his hand at Grand General of the South. Is General Qin planning to lead all the troops to Jinhai City? Grand General of the South also looked at General Qin with some worry at this moment, although he felt that General Qin would not deceive him. Leading so many troops openly to Jinhai City still made him a little worried. If General Qin were to betray them directly at that time, wouldn't they be completely lost? Grand General of the South was not afraid of the southern region falling into the hands of the Prince of Jinbei's estate. He was afraid that the Prince of Jinbei's estate would be unable to resist the Sea Clan's attack then. Luo Cheng, let General Wu see your strength. General Qin naturally knew Grand General of the South's concerns at this moment, so he clapped his hands at Luo Cheng beside him. Luo Cheng also nodded after hearing General Qin's words, and then he took out a black horn and blew it. The next second, one after another ghostly sound came from the shadows. A moment later, the 18 riders of Yin quickly appeared in front of Luo Cheng. And at this moment, the aura of the Dharma aspect realm on the 18 riders of Yin completely erupted. The 18 Dharma aspect realm auras completely shocked Grand General of the South. Their cultivation has all reached the Dharma aspect realm. Grand General of the South pointed at the 18 riders of Yin in front of him with an incredulous expression and spoke blankly. He had not expected that the Prince of Jinbei's estate could casually produce more than 10 Dharma aspect realm existences. It's not just them, it's us too. The 7 generals of the Yang family also slowly stepped forward and spoke when they saw the shock on Grand General of the South's face. At the same time, their auras also completely erupted. An aura also belonging to the Dharma aspect realm appeared again around Grand General of the South. You are also Dharma aspect realm experts. Grand General of the South, feeling this incredible scene, looked blankly at the 7 generals of the Yang family again. After a long while, Grand General of the South shook his head and recovered, but his eyes still held a look of shock. Since they are all Dharma aspect realm experts, then the strength of the 3 generals is also. Then Grand General of the South looked at General Qin, Yang Yi, and Luo Cheng and spoke softly. Although he didn't finish his sentence, the 3 of them knew what he wanted to say. That's right, this general is one of the 3 perfected Dharma aspect realm cultivators by the young master's side. General Qin slowly spoke in response to Grand General of the South's question, without any trace of pride on his face. After all, he knew that there was also a king realm existence by his young master's side, so his strength truly wasn't much. Of course, in the entire eastern region, his strength could still rank among the top. Chapter 142 Wu Tianxi surrenders. Wu Tianxi confronts Wu Tong at the gates of Jinhai City. The Grand General of the South was even more shocked after hearing Qin Xiong's reply. Although he had just guessed that Qin Xiong might be one of the 3 powerful experts in the perfected Dharma aspect realm beside that young master. Actually receiving confirmation made him clearly more astonished, as this person stood at the pinnacle of the eastern region. His strength had reached the perfected Dharma aspect realm, a level he had never touched. What shocked him even more, of course, was that this single division of the army alone had over 20 existences in the Dharma aspect realm. If this was the case, then just how powerful was the true army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate, and how many Dharma aspect realm existences did the Prince of Jinbei's estate truly possess? Perhaps initially, the Grand General of the South had thought the Prince of Jinbei's estate couldn't defeat the Great Yin dynasty, but now he realized how ridiculous his initial thoughts were. After all, if the Prince of Jinbei's estate, possessing such strength, still couldn't defeat the Great Yin dynasty, wouldn't the Great Yin dynasty have already dominated the entire eastern region? Moreover, the Grand General of the South now understood that Qin Xiong had just given him a chance. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have had the opportunity to meet Qin Xiong. It could even be said that he, the Grand General of the South, didn't have the qualifications to meet even a single general from the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Thinking of this, the Grand General of the South finally felt relieved. At the same time, A look of excitement appeared on his face. Because with such a powerful force, they could definitely resolve the issue of the sea race outside Jinhai City. Although the sea race would flee into the sea, with so many Dharma aspect realm existences present, even if they couldn't completely wipe out the sea race, he believed the sea race wouldn't dare provoke Jinhai City again in the future. From this moment forth, the Grand General of the South swears eternal allegiance to the Prince of Junbei's estate. Having figured this out, the Grand General of the South immediately spoke to Qin Xiong. At this moment, he already knew the outcome. In fact, even if he hadn't known the outcome, he had already planned to defect to the Prince of Junbei's estate. The Prince of Junbei's estate, with such formidable strength, could certainly defend the southern region and might even eradicate the sea race, which had always been their enemy. General Wu, won't you reconsider? Qin Xiong joked with him after hearing the Grand General of the South's words. Though Qin Xiong also knew why the Grand General of the South was so decisively seeking allegiance to the Prince of Junbei's estate. Even if Qin Xiong were in the Grand General of the South's position, he wouldn't dare oppose the Prince of Junbei's estate. After all, this involved over 20 existences in the Dharma aspect realm. I Wu sincerely and wholeheartedly pledge allegiance to the Prince of Junbei's estate, and I hope General will accept my sincerity. After hearing Qin Xiong's words, the Grand General of the South spoke earnestly to Qin Xiong. The seriousness on his face moved even Qin Xiong. Good. Since General Wu has pledged allegiance to my Prince of Junbei's estate, this general shall accept General Wu on behalf of His Highness, the young master. Qin Xiong spoke to the Grand General of the South with a serious expression, and after finishing, he slowly walked toward the interior of the military tent. The Grand General of the South, without the slightest hesitation, followed Qin Xiong and the others into the military tent. Since General Wu has already defected to my Prince of Junbei's estate, the southern region is now completely incorporated into the jurisdiction of my Prince of Junbei's estate, starting from this moment. General Yang Yi, take the Yang family army and General Wu's token of authority to secure the cities in the southern region that have not yet been captured. This general, meanwhile, will lead Luo Cheng and the remaining troops to Jinhai City to deal with the sea race. Upon hearing Qin Xiong's instructions, the Grand General of the South wisely took out his command token and slowly handed it to Yang Yi. Please rest assured, General Qin, this old man will absolutely secure the entire southern region at the fastest possible speed. As Yang Yi received the Grand General of the South's token, he slowly spoke to Qin Xiong, but a very serious expression could be seen on his face. Clearly, Yang Yi was extremely confident and earnest at this moment. Next, let's head to Jinhai City. After Qin Xiong nodded to Yang Yi, he finally turned his gaze toward the Grand General of the South standing before him. As the plans of the two armies proceeded, and with the Grand General of the South's cooperation, Qin Xiong led 200,000 troops effortlessly, appearing outside Jinhai City in just a few days. Wu Tong, the current garrison commander of Jinhai City, showed a look of panic when he saw the 200,000 troops outside the city. He hadn't expected that less than half a month after his own Grand General left, the army of the Prince of Junbei's estate would already have reached Jinhai City. More importantly, Wu Tong saw the massive army outside without even receiving a warning, which caused a hint of despair to appear on his face. Is heaven trying to destroy my Wu family? Is heaven trying to destroy my southern region? Wu Tong spoke with a grim look in his eyes as he watched the 200,000 troops below the city, but then a determined expression appeared on his face. As a son of the Wu family, even if he fought to the death, he could not show cowardice. As for the other soldiers on the city wall, they looked incredulously at the 200,000 troops outside. Although they had heard that the Prince of Junbei's estate had launched an attack on their southern region, they hadn't expected the army of the Prince of Junbei's estate to arrive so quickly. Just as the soldiers of Jinhai City fell into panic, a familiar figure slowly walked out from among the 200,000 troops outside the city gate. Seeing this sight, Wu Tong rubbed his eyes, then carefully looked down at the familiar figure below. Wu Tong, open the city gate and let the army enter. The Grand General of the South slowly approached the city gate, then raised his head and spoke slowly to Wu Tong above. Are you truly the Grand General? After hearing the Grand General of the South's words, Wu Tong questioned him with some suspicion, and a look of vigilance appeared on his face. Clearly, he suspected that the Grand General of the South outside was not the real Grand General of the South. Wu Tong, are you doubting that someone is impersonating this general? The Grand General of the South was slightly stunned upon hearing Wu Tong's words, but he quickly recovered and spoke directly to Wu Tong on the city wall. General, how can you prove that you are the Grand General of the South of my southern region? And who are these people behind you? Wu Tong took a deep breath and spoke to the Grand General of the South before him. Wu Tong's expression was complicated as he looked at the 200,000 troops behind the Grand General of the South. If the person below was truly his own Grand General, wouldn't that mean his Grand General had already defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate? Otherwise, how could he have so many troops behind him? Wu Tong certainly didn't believe that the Imperial Court's army would come support them, and it seemed the Imperial Court's army didn't have the time to support them now anyway. But if his own Grand General truly defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate, Wu Tong genuinely wouldn't know what to do. After all, the Grand General of the South was not just the Grand General of the South. He was also the patriarch of the Wu family. He was also the object of worship for Wu Tong since childhood. Chapter 143: The Army Enters Zhenhai City. Strategies for Dealing with the Sea Clan. The Grand General of the South felt helpless after hearing Wu Tong's words, but it was difficult for him to explain himself right now. If he hadn't witnessed the power of the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate, he wouldn't have surrendered so quickly. However, he couldn't possibly raise his voice and explain everything to Wu Tong at this moment. Wu Tong, this general is indeed the Grand General of the South. Of course, the army behind this general is the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate. You can assume this general has already defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. The helpless Grand General of the South spoke directly to Wu Tong. Instead of explaining, he simply admitted that he had defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. So now, does the general intend to hand the entire Zhenhai city over to the Prince of Jinbei's estate? After hearing the Grand General of the South's words, a complex look appeared in Wu Tong's eyes as he stared at the Grand General of the South. At this point, he naturally recognized that the person in front of him was the real Grand General of the South. However, the news that the Grand General he had always admired had defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate made it difficult for him to recover his senses. Wu Tong's expression was extremely conflicted at that moment. Is that really the Grand General outside? But how could he lead the Prince of Jinbei's estate's army to our Zhenhai city? Did the Grand General really defect to the Prince of Jinbei's estate? Why would the Grand General do this? Does the Grand General no longer want our Zhenhai city army? What? The Grand General only left for a short time and became like this? Why doesn't the Grand General want us anymore? As the conversation between the Grand General of the South and Wu Tong spread throughout Zhenhai city, all the soldiers in Zhenhai city began to panic. They had never expected that their Grand General had already defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Now, they all hoped that the person outside was a fake Grand General of the South. That way, they might feel slightly better. That's right. I now order you to open the city gates. The Grand General of the South did not want to explain too much at this moment, so he issued the command to Wu Tong on the city wall. Open the city gates. Wu Tong glanced at the Grand General of the South with complex eyes, took a deep breath, and then gave the order to the soldiers beside him. Although he knew that opening the city gates meant that the entire Zhenhai city would fall into the hands of the Prince of Jinbei's estate, he could not refuse the command of his Grand General and his own family head. Following Wu Tong's order, the previously hesitant soldiers immediately went to the gate and opened it. After all, both their Grand General and General Wu Tong had decided to defect to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. So what else could they do? As the gates of Zhenhai city slowly lowered, the soldiers inside Zhenhai city also slowly bowed their heads. At this moment, they had completely become captives. Qin Xiong, seeing this scene, slowly rode his warhorse out with satisfaction. He hadn't appeared earlier because he wanted to observe the loyalty of Zhenhai city to the Grand General of the South. Now it seemed that the soldiers and the defending general of Zhenhai city were quite loyal to the Grand General of the South. They were even willing to defect directly to the Prince of Jinbei's estate, which clearly showed that the Grand General of the South's prestige in Zhenhai city was quite high. Enter the city. Qin Xiong, who had moved to the front of the formation, immediately issued the command to the 200,000-strong army behind him. Following his order, the 200,000 troops marched majestically toward Zhenhai city. The Grand General of the South, standing beside Qin Xiong, showed a complex expression upon seeing this scene. Although he had long since defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate, he hadn't expected his own Zhenhai city to be handed over to others so quickly. At this moment, Wu Tong also arrived at the city gate to welcome his Grand General, though his expression remained conflicted. Greetings, General. Wu Tong sighed softly as he looked at the two figures in front of his Grand General, then directly bowed to Qin Xiong and Luo Cheng. Rise. Your cultivation is quite good. Qin Xiong glanced at Wu Tong and nodded in satisfaction. Following this, Qin Xiong, Luo Cheng, and the others followed Wu Tong's steps toward the Zhenhai city lord's estate. Although Zhenhai city was the strongest city in the entire southern region, the layout of the city lord's estate here was not as extravagant as imagined. It looked much more ancient. Now that we have arrived at Zhenhai city, it is time to deal with the sea race outside Zhenhai city. Qin Xiong, now inside Zhenhai city, sat in the city lord's estate and addressed the Grand General of the South, Wu Tong, and the others below him. Besides the Grand General of the South and Wu Tong, there were other Grotto Heaven Realm generals from Jinhai City present in the City Lord's estate. Jinhai City truly lived up to its reputation as the strongest city in the southern region. It had dozens of Grotto Heaven Realm generals, and there were even 3 cultivators of the Shenyu realm. Besides the Grand General of the South and Wu Tong, there was also an old man. When these generals heard Qin Xiong's words, they all looked up at him in surprise. However, seeing that their Grand General showed no surprise, they mostly guessed why their Grand General had defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. They figured this was the condition for their Grand General's defection to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. General, the Sea race has a Sea Emperor-level existence. Although Wu Tong greatly trusted his Grand General, he still couldn't help but stand up and remind Qin Xiong. When the others heard Wu Tong's words, they all turned their attention toward Qin Xiong. Although they also wanted to eliminate the Sea race outside, the Sea race had a Sea Emperor, and there were dozens of Sea King-level Yao beasts. This was not something they could currently contend with. Don't worry. Since this general has decided to eradicate the Sea race, this general certainly has the necessary strength. Qin Xiong showed no anger regarding Wu Tong's doubt. Instead, he calmly waved his hand at Wu Tong, and then slowly shifted his gaze toward the Grand General of the South. General Qin, how do you plan to deal with the Sea race? After seeing Qin Xiong's gaze, the Grand General of the South slowly raised his head and asked Qin Xiong, curiosity appearing on his face. Clearly, the Grand General of the South also wanted to know exactly how Qin Xiong intended to deal with the Sea race outside, as their numbers totaled several million. If a cultivator of the human race has not reached the Divine Power Realm, he cannot fly. Therefore, cultivators below the Divine Ability level cannot go out and fight the Sea race on the ocean, which greatly reduces their combat strength. We will deploy all cultivators above the Divine Power Realm to fight the Sea race. We will adopt a high versus low strategy, which will allow us to easily break through the Sea race's defenses. Qin Xiong had naturally thought of a countermeasure long ago, so he slowly spoke to the confused individuals before him. Their side was already very powerful. The only trouble was that to deal with the Sea race in the ocean, they needed the ability to fly. Chapter 144, Preparing to Exterminate the Sea Clan. The Sea Clan's Fantasy. Luo Cheng, who was beside General Qin, also nodded after hearing General Qin's words. Although the Sea Emperor's race lived in the sea, making them difficult to deal with, their side had the advantage in terms of powerful cultivators. Therefore, there was still a certain chance to completely resolve them. How should General Qin's strategy of high against low be implemented? However, Grand General of the South and the others at this time did not understand the meaning of General Qin's words, so Grand General of the South somewhat awkwardly stepped forward and asked General Qin. Actually, it was not their fault. After all, in the Xuanhuan world, most matters were determined by strength, so they naturally had little exposure to such strategies. The high against low method means that our powerful cultivators will target their weaker tiers. For example, our cultivators of the Divine Power Realm will deal with their cultivators below the Divine Power Realm, and our cultivators of the Grotto Heaven Realm will deal with their Divine Power cultivators, and so on. After hearing Grand General of the South's words, General Qin slowly explained the true meaning of this strategy. General Qin, our Jinhai City has a total of several hundred cultivators of the Divine Power Realm and dozens of experts of the Grotto Heaven Realm. As for cultivators of the Spirit Roaming Realm, we only have 3 of us. At this moment, Grand General of the South somewhat awkwardly stepped forward and said to General Qin. After all, General Qin's side had 20 cultivators of the Dharma Aspect Realm, so the strength of their Jinhai City still seemed too weak. No matter, the army I brought includes 2,000 cultivators of the Divine Power Realm and 200 cultivators of the Grotto Heaven Realm. As for cultivators of the Spirit Roaming Realm, there are 20. Including this general, there are 22 cultivators above the Spirit Roaming Realm. General Qin waved his hand indifferently after hearing Grand General of the South's words, and then slowly spoke to Grand General of the South. The cultivators he mentioned were all experts drawn from the Black Armored Iron Cavalry. Among the Black Armored Iron Cavalry, besides him, an expert of the Dharma Aspect Realm, there were also 2 vice-generals in the early phase of the Dharma Aspect Realm. Therefore, adding Luo Cheng and the 18 riders of Yin he led, there were a total of 22 experts of the Dharma Aspect Realm. As for the others, after hearing General Qin's words, they looked at General Qin with shocked expressions. They had not expected General Qin to bring so many experts. Just the experts of the Spirit Roaming Realm number 20 and the experts above the Spirit Roaming Realm number 22. Did this not mean that 22 people had reached the Dharma Aspect Realm? Upon hearing this news, Wu Tong and the others also turned their gazes towards Grand General of the South, wanting to know if this news was true. Seeing the gazes of Wu Tong and the others, Grand General of the South nodded. After seeing Grand General of the South nod, Wu Tong and the others were instantly stunned. They had not expected their conjecture to be true. One must know, these were experts of the Dharma aspect realm. How could they be so numerous in the Prince of Junbei's estate? As if they were free for the taking. If there are no objections, then prepare to launch an attack on the Sea Emperor's race. General Qin naturally saw the shock of these people at their strength. However, General Qin at this moment did not pay attention to their inner shock. Instead, he directly issued orders to everyone. Upon hearing the order, everyone finally recovered from their shock and then walked out of the main hall in a daze. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Sea Emperor of the Sea Emperor's race had also received news about Jinhai City. I didn't expect this Grand General of the South to surrender so quickly to this so-called Prince of Junbei's estate. It seems this Grand General of the South is too weak. A Sea King couldn't help but step forward and complain. He hadn't expected Grand General of the South, who had always been opposing them, to surrender so quickly to the Prince of Junbei's estate. That's right, this Grand General of the South truly disgraces us. We actually fought against such an opponent for decades. It truly ruins my reputation. Another Sea King also couldn't help but step forward and speak, with a look of disdain in his eyes. Apparently, he also hadn't expected Grand General of the South to surrender to the Prince of Junbei's estate so quickly, which instantly shattered their Sea Emperor's race's plan. They had originally planned to make their move when Grand General of the South and the Prince of Junbei's estate's army were both heavily wounded, but now Grand General of the South's direct surrender dealt them a heavy blow. Grand General of the South's surrender to the Prince of Junbei's estate did not weaken Jinhai City's strength. Instead, it strengthened Jinhai City's strength due to the arrival of the Prince of Junbei's estate's army. Could it be that the Prince of Junbei's estate's strength is so great that Grand General of the South had no choice but to surrender? Just as everyone was complaining about Grand General of the South, a Sea King frowned and slowly stepped forward to speak, and one could see a worried expression in his eyes. The other Sea Kings all turned their gazes to him after hearing this Sea King's words. These gazes contained disdain, contempt, and suspicion. Old Knight's idea is the same as mine. We all understand Grand General of the South's temperament. If the Prince of Junbei's estate's strength wasn't so great that he couldn't resist, he would never surrender. But if that's truly the case, then it will be difficult for us to launch another attack on Jinhai City. Under the many gazes, another Sea King also slowly stepped forward and spoke, with a solemn expression in his eyes. If that's truly the case, then are we of the Sea Emperor's race truly to be forever trapped in this small coastal area? A Sea King, unwilling, stepped forward and spoke to the two Sea Kings who had just spoken. At this time, he naturally also agreed with the words of these two Sea Kings. Not only him, but the other Sea Kings also agreed with the words of these two Sea Kings. Apparently, at this time, they also realized that the strength of the Prince of Junbei's estate was probably so great that Grand General of the South could not resist. Actually, we don't need to worry about this at all. No matter how strong the Prince of Junbei's estate is, doesn't it also have an opponent? The Sea Emperor slowly stepped forward and spoke after hearing the words of these Sea Kings. Then, he leisurely turned his gaze towards the direction of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty's imperial capital and continued to speak. There will inevitably be a war between the Prince of Junbei's estate and the Great Yin imperial family. That will be the time for our Sea Emperor's race to leave this coastal area. For now, we only need to lie low and wait for the opportunity of this war, and this Emperor believes that this war will come very soon. As the Sea Emperor's words fell, the faces of the Sea Kings who had originally been worried also showed a hint of excitement. After all, now that they heard the Sea Emperor's words, they also completely understood their upcoming opportunity. After all, it was impossible for the Great War between the Prince of Junbei's estate and the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty to hold back strength, so by then, Jinhai City's strength would definitely be very weak. Unfortunately, what these Sea Emperor's race members did not know was that while they were fantasizing about a beautiful future, their moment of extinction had quietly arrived. Chapter 145. At the beginning of the Great Battle, Luo Cheng met the Sea Emperor. Inside Jinhai City, streaks of light flashed, and these streaks of light were none other than Qin Xiong and others. At this moment, Qin Xiong held his twin maces, looking like a heavenly god descended from the heavens. Behind him, Luo Cheng held his silver spear, his gaze filled with meaning as he stared at the sea below. His eyes seemed to penetrate this expanse of sea, looking towards the Sea Clan within. As for the 18 riders of Yin Yun behind Luo Cheng, they exuded a terrifying chill, causing the temperature between heaven and earth to drop by several degrees. Behind them were the experts above the divine power realm from the Black Armored Iron Cavalry. On the other side, Grand General of the South and Wu Tong, upon sensing the terrifying aura emanating from Qin Xiong and the others, were also filled with terror. Although Grand General of the South had long known of the power of Qin Xiong and the others, sensing the aura from Qin Xiong and Luo Cheng still made him afraid. As for Wu Tong and the others, they did not know the true strength of Qin Xiong and his group, but the aura emanating from them still made him tremble. Are these the powerhouses of the Prince of Jinbei's estate? As expected of the subordinates of that mysterious heir of the Prince of Jinbei's estate, their strength is probably among the top in the entire eastern region. Wu Tong looked at Qin Xiong and the others with shock in his eyes. At the same time, he understood why his general had so decisively pledged allegiance to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Such an army, such individuals, how could they possibly resist? "See, Emperor, please come out for a meeting." Grand General of the South glanced at Qin Xiong, then slowly stepped forward and spoke to the vast sea before him. His voice penetrated the sea, directly reaching the ears of the Sea Emperor at the bottom of the ocean. Why does this fellow Grand General of the South have time to look for this general? Is he not afraid this general will keep him here? The Sea Emperor, who was fantasizing about the future in the sea, naturally heard Grand General of the South's voice. He frowned and looked up toward the sky. It was fine if he didn't look, but when he did, he was greatly astonished. He hadn't expected so many powerful cultivators to be standing in the sky above the sea. In fact, the leading Qin Xiong and Luo Cheng gave him a sense of mortal threat. Clearly, if he went out to meet them, his only outcome would be death. This scoundrel actually brought the experts of the Prince of Jinbei's estate to the sea. It seems he wants to use the powerhouses of the Prince of Jinbei's estate to deal with our Sea clan. With just one glance at Qin Xiong and Luo Cheng, the Sea Emperor understood Grand General of the South's intention. He gnashed his teeth as he looked at Grand General of the South. If looks could kill, then Grand General of the South would probably have been torn to shreds by now. "Lord Sea Emperor, let this general go out and meet this fellow." A Sea King, unable to stand Grand General of the South's face at this moment, stood up angrily and spoke to the Sea Emperor, a look of eagerness appearing on his face. "Are you looking for death? Those people up there are not someone you can deal with." The Sea Emperor, already filled with anger, instantly slapped the Sea King flying after hearing his words, then glared at the Sea King with resentment. Clearly, he had now made the Sea King his punching bag, as it was impossible for him to go up there. If he went up, he might not come back down. The other Sea Kings were also somewhat shocked by this scene, but seeing the anger on the Sea Emperor's face, they dared not say anything more, instead lowering their heads and avoiding his gaze. "This general will not go out. I don't believe you can come in and kill this general." Seeing that no one objected, the Sea Emperor leisurely glanced at Qin Xiong and the others on the sea surface, then directly sat back in his position and waited. Clearly, the Sea Emperor intended to stay in the sea, as the sea was his domain. It seems this Sea Emperor dares not come out. "Luo Cheng, lead the 18 riders of Yan Yun into the sea and drive them out." Qin Xiong, on the sea surface, looked at the calm sea and slowly turned to Luo Cheng, speaking. "Cultivators who reach the Grotto Heaven realm can move in the sea, but their combat strength in the sea is not as strong as on land." However, Luo Cheng and the 18 riders of Yan Yun he led had all reached the Dharma aspect realm, so Qin Xiong was not at all worried about their safety. Upon hearing Qin Xiong's words, Luo Cheng did not hesitate and directly led the 18 riders of Yan Yun behind him into the sea. The Sea Emperor, who had been sitting in the sea watching the show, instantly stood up from his seat when he saw Luo Cheng leading the 18 riders of Yan Yun into the sea, then looked with shock at Luo Cheng and the others who were constantly approaching him. "The enemy is here. Everyone prepare." Watching Luo Cheng and the others constantly drawing closer, the Sea Emperor directly issued orders to the Sea Kings and Sea Generals around him. Following his command, everyone looked in the direction the Sea Emperor was gazing, and they saw a man in silver armor holding a silver spear, leading a dozen black-robed figures towards them. Then, weapons appeared in their hands, and they looked at Luo Cheng's direction with determined eyes. On the other side, Luo Cheng also rapidly descended through the seawater. In just a moment, he completely appeared before the Sea Palace in the underwater world. With just a glance, Luo Cheng slew the 2 shrimp soldiers and crab generals before him. Then, holding his silver spear, he continued into the Sea Palace. Whenever he encountered shrimp soldiers and crab generals, they were dealt with by the 18 riders of Yan Yun behind him before he even had to act. In just a few dozen breaths, Luo Cheng led the 18 riders of Yan Yun to the front of the Sea Emperor. This general thought the so-called Sea Emperor would be incredibly powerful, but I didn't expect the Sea Emperor of the Sea to only be in the middle stage of the Dharma body realm. "You are too weak." Luo Cheng looked at the Sea Emperor before him and couldn't help but sneer contemptuously. He had always thought the Sea Emperor of the Sea would have a strong cultivation, perhaps capable of fighting him. But upon truly seeing the Sea Emperor, he couldn't help but feel disappointed, because the Sea Emperor before him had only reached the middle stage of the Dharma Body realm. Perhaps in the eastern region, this Sea Emperor's actions were considered good, but in Luo Cheng's eyes, he was too weak, so weak that Luo Cheng didn't even want to make a move. To be so presumptuous in this general's domain, you were looking for death. Upon hearing Luo Cheng's words, the Sea Emperor also became completely enraged. It hadn't expected anyone to look down on it so much. Chapter 146, Ruthless Massacre, the forces behind the Sea Emperor. The Sea Emperor's aura, which belonged to the middle stage of the Dharma Body realm, surged completely. Perhaps because it was in the underwater world, the Sea Emperor's aura, belonging to the middle stage of the Dharma Body realm, had already reached the late Dharma aspect stage. In Luo Cheng's view, such an aura was too weak. After all, although Luo Cheng had only reached the perfected Dharma aspect realm at this time, he could now fight against a cultivator who had just entered the King realm. Then, Luo Cheng's silver spear directly stabbed towards the Sea Emperor in front of him, and a terrifying force, carrying monstrous seawater, rushed towards the Sea Emperor. The powerful and terrifying aura instantly suppressed the entire underwater world. A look of horror appeared on the Sea Emperor's face when he saw this scene. He quickly tried to dodge Luo Cheng's spear. However, being only in the middle stage of the Dharma Body realm, how could he withstand this spear? Fortunately, at this time, both the Sea Emperor and Luo Cheng were in the underwater world. Therefore, the Sea Emperor barely managed to dodge Luo Cheng's spear, but Luo Cheng's spear still struck the Sea Emperor's arm, instantly severing one of his arms. The severed arm instantly transformed into a pink tentacle. Seeing this, the Sea Emperor did not resist. Instead, he quickly transformed into a sea monster hundreds of feet tall and fled instantly. So it's just a small octopus. This general thought this so-called Sea Emperor was something else. Seeing this, Luo Cheng naturally knew what the Sea Emperor's true form was. It turned out that the Sea Emperor's true form was a giant pink octopus. Watching the octopus, which had turned into a pink glow and disappeared, Luo Cheng did not stop. He directly transformed into a silver light and chased after the pink octopus. As for the remaining 18 riders of Yin Yun, they began to slaughter the other sea monsters in the deep sea. The cultivation of those Sea King-level sea monsters, although seemingly very powerful in normal times, appeared so insignificant in front of the 18 riders of Yin Yun. In just a few exchanges, several Sea Kings fell. The other Sea Kings, seeing this, also transformed into their true forms and began to flee in the sea. Their true forms were also strange and varied. Some were catfish, some were small monsters, and some were goldfish, all transformed from the fish Yao of the sea. The slaughter speed of the 18 riders of Yin Yun was not comparable to ordinary cavalry. In just a moment, they completely stirred up the sea clan of the entire underwater world. One sea monster after another constantly fled in the underwater world. Qin Xiong and the others on the surface of the sea naturally clearly saw the chaos in the underwater world. Now is the time for you to act. Qin Xiong looked at the fleeing sea clan below and spoke to the cultivators above the divine power realm beside him. After speaking, he took out a long bow from his storage ring. The purple long bow looked very dazzling in his hand, and the twin maces that were initially in his hand were naturally put away by him. Then, Qin Xiong slowly pulled the long bow in his hand, and a purple arrow appeared on the bowstring. His eyes slowly fixed on a Sea King-level catfish that was fleeing. He gently released the bowstring in his hand, and in the next second, a purple arrow instantly shot out from his hand, as if piercing through time and space, and plunged into the sea. Then, this purple arrow directly pierced through the Sea King-level catfish below, instantly pinning it to the seabed. Grand General of the South and the others, seeing this scene, also took out long bows and began to shoot and kill the fleeing Sea Clan in the underwater world. In fact, Qin Xiong had not expected the Sea Clan's strength to be so weak. Otherwise, how could he have come up with such a plan at the beginning? As one arrow after another entered the sea, these arrows continuously shot and killed the underwater Yao race. Dense arrows pierced through the surface of the sea and directly shot and killed the Sea Clan. What unfolded before everyone next was a feast of slaughter. The power of Qin Xiong's purple long bow was even more significant, often shooting and killing dozens or even hundreds of Yao beasts with one arrow. While Qin Xiong was leading everyone to shoot and kill the underwater Sea Clan, Luo Cheng on the other side also caught up with the fleeing pink octopus. Although the pink octopus's escape speed was very fast, it still seemed a bit slow in front of Luo Cheng. Luo Cheng only took less than a moment to catch up with him. "You little octopus, keep running." Luo Cheng, standing in front of the pink octopus, spoke to the octopus with a mocking tone. "Don't be too arrogant. My father is the grand elder of our octopus clan. If you kill me, my father will definitely not let you off." At that time, The entire Prince of Junbei's estate will be buried with me. A look of horror appeared on the pink octopus's face as he looked at Luo Cheng, but at this time, he did not forget to threaten Luo Cheng. Even if your father comes, I will kill him in one fell swoop. Luo Cheng didn't care about the octopus's words. Instead, he calmly replied to the octopus. My father is a saint-level expert. Do you know what a saint-level expert represents? Upon hearing Luo Cheng's indifferent words, the octopus instantly became furious. In his heart, his father was the most important existence, so he naturally could not let Luo Cheng slander his father. Then wait until he comes. No matter what, I will kill you today. Luo Cheng had not expected that the father of the little octopus in front of him was a saint entry-level existence. He naturally knew how powerful a saint-level expert was, but Luo Cheng would naturally not fear a so-called saint-level expert. He did not give the octopus in front of him too much time for nonsense. Instead, he directly held his silver spear and charged towards the octopus. His silver spear instantly severed another one of the octopus's tentacles. After roaring, the octopus directly unleashed all of its strength and charged at Luo Cheng. At this time, he naturally knew that if he continued to flee, he would definitely not escape. However, his ridiculous attack posed no great threat to Luo Cheng. Luo Cheng's body suddenly grew larger. His entire being instantly transformed into a giant hundreds of feet tall. Then, he held his silver spear and slashed at the octopus in front of him. The terrifying silver spear directly split the octopus in front of him into two halves. Only the octopus's dying shriek was heard. Luo Cheng did not care about the octopus's shriek. Instead, he reverted his body to its original state, and then his entire being transformed into a stream of light and disappeared into the sea area. When he reappeared, he had already arrived beside Qin Xiong. Chapter 147 The Western Sea Clan King Moves. Chu Long stands in confrontation at the border Qinxing. Luo Cheng, who had arrived in front of Qin Xiong, nodded at him. Then, he likewise took out a silver longbow from the system space and began slaughtering the Sea Clan members below. Just as Luo Cheng and the others were slaughtering the Sea Clan members below, in a sea area of the western regions, an old man wearing a pink robe suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes seemed to pierce through space and time, gazing toward the scene in the eastern region, and a look of intense hatred appeared on his face. Who exactly killed my son? Following that, his furious voice spread directly throughout the entire sea area, and all the Sea Clan members in the sea area heard the old man's voice. Consequently, many gazes instantly turned toward the old man. The old man ignored these gazes and instead began performing a divination. After a moment, a pink thread appeared in his hand, and at the same time, a cruel smile appeared on the old man's face. Seven Blades, quickly come and see me. After obtaining the answer he sought, the old man's authoritative voice spread throughout the entire sea area. As soon as his voice fell, a middle-aged man wearing a black robe appeared beside him. The middle-aged man radiated the aura only possessed by those in the King Realm. Clearly, the cultivation of this middle-aged man had already reached the King Realm. Your subordinate, Seven Blades, greets the Grand Elder. The middle-aged man respectfully bowed to the old man before him. Go and bring back the murderer who killed my son. If he resists, slaughter him on the spot. The old man silently nodded while looking at the middle-aged man. Then, the pink thread in his hand instantly transformed into a pink token. The old man directly threw the pink token in his hand to the middle-aged man before him. Please rest assured, Grand Elder, Seven Blades will definitely bring this person back to the Grand Elder. The middle-aged man respectfully accepted the pink token, and then his entire body instantly turned into a phantom and vanished from spot. No matter who you are, dare to kill my son, and I will make your life worse than death. After watching the middle-aged man disappear, the old man looked toward the sky with malicious eyes. Afterward, the old man closed his eyes again and resumed his secluded cultivation. The direction the middle-aged man headed was precisely where Luo Cheng and the others were located. As for the old man, he was the Grand Elder of the Octopus Clan, and his cultivation had already reached the Saint entry level. Just now, upon divining that his son had fallen at the hands of a cultivator in the perfected Dharma aspect realm, he immediately dispatched a King Realm cultivator. After all, he did not believe that a cultivator in the Dharma aspect realm could contend with a King Realm cultivator. At this moment, Luo Cheng did not yet know that a King Realm cultivator was already coming to seek revenge against him. Currently, he and Qin Xiong had finished dealing with the Sea Clan members in the sea area below. After millions of Sea Clan members were shot down, the entire sea area turned into a sea of blood, yet this sea of blood appeared so peaceful, as if the Sea Clan members who were killed were all unforgivable existences. After dealing with the Sea Clan members in this sea area, Qin Xiong and the others began consolidating the entire southern region. Since there was no Sea clan presence in the sea area, Zhenhai City was no longer as crucial. However, Zhenhai City, which the Wu family had guarded for generations, was naturally handed back to the Wu family. As for Grand General of the South and Wutong, they had completely submitted to Qin Xiong, so they requested to follow by Qin Xiong's side as two vanguards. Qin Xiong agreed to the requests of Grand General of the South and Wutong and kept the two men by his side. Half a month quickly passed. During this half-month, many things happened. For instance, numerous cultivators went to the Prince of Jinbei's estate to assassinate members of the Yang family. Of course, the Prince of Jinbei's estate was not the same as before. With Old Huang, a Dharma aspect realm existence, guarding the Prince of Jinbei's estate, these assassins naturally perished there. Naturally, many times Old Huang didn't even have to act, as these assassins were dealt with by Chu Long's subordinates. Meanwhile, the army of the Tianqing dynasty had also been mobilized. However, instead of directly attacking the northern region, the Tianqing dynasty army stationed itself outside the northern region, instantly causing the entire world situation to shift once again. Everyone knew that the Tianqing dynasty intended to reap the benefits of other struggles, but at the same time, they knew this was the Tianqing dynasty's best opportunity. Just as the Tianqing dynasty army was stationed outside the northern region, Chu Long, not showing any weakness, led 600,000 northern region troops to the border pass of the northern region. Instantly, the two armies faced off against each other. On the other side, Xiao Zi also arrived by Chu Fan's side. This time, she stuck even closer to Chu Fan, giving him an immense headache. Even more importantly, Ouyang Feng had also been sticking close to Chu Fan, which started to distress Chu Fan, who originally wanted to live a peaceful life for a while. I didn't expect Qin Xiong to resolve the southern region's battle so quickly. The next step is to directly attack the imperial capital of Great Yin. When Chu Fan, inside the tent, received the news from Qin Xiong, a long-lost smile appeared on his face. He had been waiting for news from Qin Xiong for days. After waiting for so many days, he finally received the news from Qin Xiong. Yes, now we only need to press forward with the armies from the four regions to take down the Great Yin dynasty. Once that is done, we can counterattack the Tianqing dynasty. Guojia also spoke with a smile at this moment. They could say they had reached the most crucial juncture. As long as they dealt with the imperial capital of Great Yin, they could completely seize the Great Yin dynasty. At that time, their young lord could establish an imperial dynasty. That damned Tianqing dynasty actually dared to try and seize the northern region using this opportunity. Once we have the chance, we will absolutely annihilate them. When Marshal Chu Hang, who was beside Chu Fan, heard Guojia, an angry expression also appeared on his face. As Chu Long's adopted son, he naturally detested the actions of the Tianqing dynasty. After all, no one wanted to see the territory they worked so hard to conquer be easily taken by others. Uncle Hang, don't worry. I believe Grandpa can withstand their attack. Moreover, as soon as we finish the battle against the Great Yin dynasty, we will immediately launch a counterattack against them. After all, my Prince of Jinbei's estate is not to be trifled with. Although Chu Fan and Guojia had long guessed the Tianqing dynasty's move, Chu Fan still felt a burst of anger the moment he learned the Tianqing dynasty had truly mobilized its troops. After all, this action by the Tianqing dynasty had completely infuriated Chu Fan. Furthermore, Chu Fan's original goal was to conquer the four great dynasties and establish an imperial dynasty. Therefore, it was naturally impossible for him to let the Tianqing dynasty off. Chapter 148, The All-Out Offensive unfolds, and the Great Yin dynasty's response. Moreover, the current situation isn't too bad for them. After all, Chu Long possesses an army of 600,000, so resisting the Tianqing dynasty's attack will be effortless. As long as they can swiftly deal with the Great Yin dynasty, turning their attention to attacking the Tianqing dynasty will be much easier. Your Highness, the time to conquer the Great Yin dynasty has arrived. Guojia glanced at everyone present, slowly stepped forward, and spoke to Chu Fan, his eyes gleaming with excitement. As long as the Great Yin dynasty is taken, His Highness can dominate the entire Great Yin, and then His Highness can establish an imperial dynasty. Yes, the final decisive battle should be here. Upon hearing Guojia's words, Chu Fan also slowly raised his head, looking in the direction of the imperial capital of Great Yin, his eyes filled with anticipation. The other generals, hearing Chu Fan and Guojia's words, all showed a hint of excited emotion in their eyes. Marshal Chu Hang's eyes, in particular, burned with an unprecedented fervor. He hadn't expected that in such a short time, they would arrive at the final decisive battle. Have Innate of Luo notify the armies of the other three regions that they can launch a full-scale attack on the imperial capital of Great Yin. Chu Fan withdrew his gaze and slowly spoke to Guojia in front of him. Yes, this humble general will arrange it immediately. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, Guijia quickly departed. Qingji, the first battle for the eastern region to enter the imperial capital, is now entrusted to you. After watching Guijia leave, Chu Fan turned his gaze to Chun Qingji beside him and slowly spoke to Chun Qingji. Your Highness, rest assured, this humble general will capture the imperial capital of Great Yin in the shortest possible time. Upon hearing Chu Fan's order, Chun Qingji stepped forward and assured Chu Fan, his eyes filled with unprecedented determination. All armies of the eastern region are at your disposal. I hope you will resolve the Great Yin dynasty as quickly as possible. Chu Fan still trusted Chun Qingji greatly, so he slowly spoke to Chun Qingji, and after speaking, his gaze swept over Yang Tianzhan and others. This humble general accepts the order. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, Chun Qingji solemnly cupped his hands towards Chu Fan. At this moment, a hint of solemnity and confidence appeared on his face. Since His Highness trusted him so much, he had to fight this battle perfectly. A few days after Chu Fan issued the order, the Eastern Region's army, led by Chun Qingji, launched a full-scale assault towards the imperial capital of Great Yin. The total number of troops in the Eastern Region at this time reached an astonishing 800,000. Besides the 100,000 White Robe army led by Chun Qingji, there were 100,000 of the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate, brought by Marshal Chu Hang, plus 200,000 troops led by the King of Zhao. Then there were the 400,000 troops brought by Yang Tianzhan, totaling an astonishing 800,000. At the same time, Chun Qingji of the Eastern Region launched his attack. The other three regions also initiated their offensives. In the Northern Region, Zhang Liao led an army of 300,000, including 100,000 Bingzhou Iron Cavalry and another 200,000 troops from the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Although his route had fewer troops than Chun Qingji's side, the army of 300,000 still easily crossed the border between the Northern Region and the imperial capital of Great Yin. As for the Western Region, Yu Fei led an army of 500,000 to attack the imperial capital of Great Yin. Among these 500,000 troops, only 100,000 were Yu Fei's Yu family army, and the other 400,000 were troops Yu Fei had trained during this period. Since these armies were originally from the Western Region, they quickly took shape under Yu Fei's training. Although their combat strength was inferior to the Yu family army, they were slightly stronger than ordinary armies. Finally, the Southern Region was led by Qin Xiong and Yang Yi. Together, they commanded an army of 700,000 to attack the imperial capital of Great Yin. In addition to the armies they originally led, there were also 300,000 troops provided by the Southern Region. Although Grand General of the South and Wu Tong also served as the vanguard, accompanying their armies this time, their strength was only at the spirit roaming realm, but such cultivation was sufficient for a vanguard. Suddenly, the entire Great Yin fell into silence. After all, no one expected that the Prince of Jinbei's estate would deploy more than 2 million troops this time, and that over 2 million troops would simultaneously launch an attack on the imperial capital of the Great Yin dynasty. Damn the Prince of Jinbei's estate, damn Chu Fan, to have taken the Southern Region unknowingly. Inside the palace of the imperial capital of Great Yin, Murong Li looked at the incoming intelligence with a gloomy expression. He hadn't expected that in just 1 month, Chu Fan would take the Southern Region, and the Southern Region would directly dispatch 700,000 troops to attack their imperial capital of Great Yin. Murong Li was now even more furious than when Yang Tianzhan defected to the Prince of Jinbei's estate. If they lost this battle, the entire Great Yin dynasty would be annihilated. How many troops can we still mobilize now? Murong Li, with a gloomy face, slowly spoke to the generals and ministers in front of him, but the anger on his face could not be concealed. Reporting to Your Majesty, we can currently mobilize approximately 1.3 million troops in total. Upon hearing Murong Li's words, the Prime Minister reluctantly stepped forward and slowly spoke, a worried expression visible on his face, clearly indicating his deep concern for this major war. According to the Prime Minister's thoughts, how should we now respond to the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate? When Murong Li heard the number of troops the Great Yin dynasty could now muster, the gloom on his face became even more terrifying, but he still suppressed the anger in his heart and questioned the Prime Minister in front of him. Reporting to Your Majesty, we only have 2 plans now. The first plan is to gather all our remaining Great Yin dynasty troops in the imperial capital, thus engaging in a decisive battle with the Prince of Jinbei's estate. If we win, we can eliminate the Prince of Jinbei's estate, but if we lose... Upon hearing Murong Li's words, the Prime Minister also somewhat helplessly stepped forward and slowly spoke. When he mentioned losing, he did not continue, but everyone present understood his meaning. What about the second plan? After hearing the Prime Minister's words, Murong Li thought for a moment and then continued to question the Prime Minister. After all, the risk of that plan was too great, and he would never choose it unless absolutely necessary. The second plan is to divide our forces to deal with the armies coming from the 4 regions. Of course, this is merely a feint. Our true objective is to send experts to capture Chu Fan, and then we can threaten the army of the Prince of Junbei's estate to retreat. The Prime Minister then slowly spoke, and as he said this, a gleam appeared in his eyes, clearly indicating that this was the plan he favored most. Chapter 149 Murong Li's Decision. The Return of the Great Yin Dynasty's Ancestor. After Murong Li heard the Prime Minister's words, the gloom on his face became even more terrifying. As the Emperor of Great Yin, how could he not know that as long as Chu Fan was dealt with, the war would essentially be over? But how could Chu Fan be so easy to deal with? Do you know that Chu Fan has 3 perfected Dharma aspect realm existences by his side, and his own strength is no weaker than the spirit roaming realm? So, how do you think we should capture him? Murong Li remained silent for a long while before slowly speaking. When he mentioned this, his eyes were filled with rage, because the tyrannical power from the arrow Chu Fan shot him with last time still lingered in his body. The thought of this made him want to tear Chu Fan into 10,000 pieces. After the Prime Minister heard Murong Li's words, he also remained silent, because he knew that Chu Fan had 3 perfected Dharma aspect realm experts by his side. It would be truly difficult to complete his second plan. Your Majesty, we actually have one more proposal. Just as the Prime Minister and Murong Li fell into silence, an official slowly stepped forward and spoke. Minister Yuan, please speak. Murong Li hadn't expected someone to stand up now with a proposal. He instantly cast his gaze onto the old man. The other ministers also turned their gazes toward the old man, wanting to see what his method was. Your Majesty, perhaps we can now cooperate with other imperial dynasties. After all, the Prince of Junbei's estate's enemies are not just our Great Yin dynasty. This old minister believes the Fengyin dynasty wouldn't stand by and watch the Prince of Junbei's estate grow too powerful, right? The old man showed no fear when he noticed everyone's gaze. Instead, he slowly stated his opinion to Murong Li. After his words fell, Murong Li and the assembled ministers all fell silent. They had naturally considered this idea, but how could the Fengyin dynasty possibly offer assistance now? Even if they were in the Fengyin dynasty's position, they would only intervene after the Great Yin dynasty and the Prince of Junbei's estate had both suffered heavy losses. Your Majesty, if the Prince of Junbei's estate's strength was similar to ours, then the Fengyin dynasty might watch us both suffer. But now, the Prince of Junbei's estate's apparent strength already far surpasses ours, so the Fengyin dynasty cannot possibly stand by and watch the Prince of Junbei's estate continuously grow stronger. Seeing that no one in the main hall had spoken, the old man who had just spoken continued. After Murong Li heard the old man's words, his eyes lit up, but he quickly fell silent again because he could not bear losing face by asking the Fengyin dynasty for military assistance. Since Minister Yuan believes the Fengyin dynasty should send troops, then after I return, I will write a letter to Yun Shaotian of the Fengyin dynasty to see if he will help my Great Yin dynasty. After a long while, Murong Li finally spoke slowly, though an unprecedented weariness could be heard in his voice. As for the Great Yin dynasty's army, they shall all be summoned to the imperial capital. We will fight a decisive battle against the Prince of Junbei's estate there. At the same time, the old ancestors of our Great Yin imperial family will move out to deal with Chu Fan. If Chu Fan can be dealt with in advance, then everything will be over. Murong Li then looked toward the Prime Minister and the generals beside him and slowly spoke. This was the best plan he could think of. Your subjects obey the command. After hearing Murong Li's words, all the ministers understood his orders, and everyone cupped their hands toward Murong Li. Murong Li then ignored the ministers in the hall and left directly. Upon leaving the hall, he immediately headed to the ancestral land of the Great Yin dynasty. At this moment, the only thing he could think of was his own old ancestor. Soon, Murong Li appeared in the ancestral land. After entering the ancestral land, Murong Li looked at the several old men sitting inside, and a look of surprise and excitement appeared on his face. At the same time, the worry in his brow vanished. The current emperor of the Great Yin dynasty greets the old ancestors. He quickly approached the old men and spoke slowly, his eyes filled with unprecedented respect. How far has the Great War outside progressed? After Murong Li finished speaking, the fifth ancestor opened his eyes, slowly looked at Murong Li, and asked, The conflict between us and the Prince of Junbei's estate has reached the moment of final confrontation. Currently, the Prince of Junbei's estate is advancing completely, with more than 2 million soldiers heading toward the imperial capital. After Murong Li heard his old ancestor's words, he did not dare to hesitate and immediately stated the crisis the Great Yin dynasty was currently facing. It has reached this point? Is the main reason you came to the ancestral land this time to ask us to kill Chu Fan? The fifth ancestor hadn't expected the Prince of Junbei's estate's speed to be so fast, so he slowly looked toward Murong and said, "That is correct. The best outcome now is for the old ancestors to take action and kill Chu Fan. When the morale of the Prince of Junbei's estate collapses, that will be our opportunity." Murong was not too surprised that his old ancestor could guess his thoughts. Instead, he nodded while looking respectfully at his old ancestor. "Then let us take action and kill this so-called heir of the Prince of Junbei's estate." Before the fifth ancestor could speak, another old man slowly opened his eyes and spoke to Murong. His voice carried a hint of disdain, as if he looked down upon Chu Fan, the heir of the Prince of Junbei's estate. "Old ancestor, this heir of the Prince of Junbei's estate, Chu Fan, has 3 perfected Dharma aspect realm existences by his side." Seeing that his old ancestor held Chu Fan in such low regard, Murong spoke with some worry. He did not want his old ancestor to be so careless on the way to assassinate Chu Fan. How can cultivators of the Dharma aspect realm block us? The moment Murong's words fell, the old man who had just spoken revealed a contemptuous smile, and then a wave of chi that did not belong to the Dharma aspect realm emanated from his body. "This is a realm above the Dharma aspect realm." Murong was completely stunned when he felt this aura. He hadn't expected his old ancestor's cultivation to have reached beyond the Dharma aspect realm. Logically speaking, we shouldn't have returned to participate in this great war, but the Great Yin Dynasty is, after all, our place of origin. That is why we came back to resolve this great war and eliminate the unsettling factor that is the Prince of Junbei's estate. The old man spoke slowly when he saw the look of astonishment on Murong's face. They had already left the Eastern Domain, so logically, they shouldn't have returned to participate in this great war. Moreover, there is the Heavenly Dao Alliance. But since they are the old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty, the Heavenly Dao Alliance will turn a blind eye. This is why they came to help the Great Yin Dynasty. Chapter 150: The Royal Ancestors' Disdain, Chu Fan, and Guo Jia's Speculation. Murong could only nod after hearing the words of his family's old ancestor. "I heard you were struck by an arrow from that youth of the Prince of Junbei's estate, and that overbearing power remains in your body. Let this old man take a look." Seeing Murong remain silent, the elder who had just spoken instantly appeared beside him and pulled Murong's hand. An even more overbearing power instantly transferred from Murong's hand into his body. Subsequently, this overbearing aura and the overbearing power remaining within his body began to clash. After a moment, the overbearing power inside Murong's body was completely erased by this new overbearing power. Feeling that the overbearing power in his body had been resolved, a smile appeared on Murong's pale face. This heir of the Prince of Junbei's estate is not simple. His cultivation has probably reached the Dharma aspect realm. Otherwise, this power wouldn't be so strong, or perhaps the cultivation technique he cultivates is extremely overbearing. After resolving this overbearing power inside Murong's body, a look of surprise appeared on the elder's face, because he had just sensed that this overbearing power was already quite strong. It could be said that even an ordinary perfected Dharma aspect realm cultivator would be unable to resolve it. From this, it can be seen that the cultivation of that heir of the Prince of Junbei's estate is probably not simple, and the cultivation technique he cultivates certainly won't be weak. Even if he reaches the Dharma aspect realm, what of it? In front of us, the Dharma aspect realm is still an ant-like existence. Another elder stood up leisurely after hearing the first elder's words, and at the same time, his face carried a look of disdain. "Ha, second brother's right. Even if his strength reaches the Dharma aspect realm, he is still an ant before us." The elder who had just spoken also burst into laughter after hearing the other elder's words. Immediately after, the figures of the 3 elders instantly vanished from the ancestral land, leaving only Murong and the 5th ancestor. When Murong saw the departing figures of the 3 elders, his face was filled with anticipation. On the other side, Chu Fan, who had just entered the central region with the army, suddenly frowned. "The power I struck into Murong's body has been erased. It seems the Great Yin Dynasty is not as simple as I thought." Chu Fan leisurely looked toward the imperial capital. Chu Fan naturally sensed at the moment the overbearing power inside Murong's body was erased. To erase this power inside Murong's body, one must at least reach the King Realm. This means that the imperial capital of Great Yin currently likely has a King Realm existence. They truly are a bunch of old foxes. This heir apparent always thought that the strongest existence in the eastern region was only at the perfected Dharma aspect realm, but I didn't expect a King Realm expert to have already appeared. A smile appeared on Chu Fan's lips. He was not afraid of the Great Yin Dynasty having a King Realm cultivator, as he had Yuan Qingdu, a King Realm existence, by his side. Moreover, Yuan Qingdu had completely adapted to the Eastern region environment and had already made a breakthrough to the late King realm. Even against a King completion realm cultivator, Yuan Qingdu would have the strength to fight. Guojia, if you stood in the position of the great Yan imperial family, how would you choose to deal with my Prince of Jinbei's estate? Chu Fan slowly looked toward Guojia next to him after retracting his gaze and asked. Ouyang Feng and Xiao Zi, who were beside him, also looked curiously at Guojia. During this time, they had realized Guojia's importance to Chu Fan. At the same time, they also sensed Chu Fan's attitude toward Guojia. If I were a member of the great Yan imperial family, I would definitely send experts to assassinate your highness right now. Guojia said this without the slightest hesitation after hearing Chu Fan's question. Ouyang Tian and Yang Tianzhan were completely stunned upon hearing Guojia's words. They hadn't expected the person in front of them would dare to speak to Chu Fan like this. Now everyone in the world knows that the heir has 3 perfected Dharma aspect realm existences by his side. How would the great Yin imperial family dare to assassinate heir your highness? At this moment, Ouyang Feng, looking confused, stepped forward and questioned Guojia. Although assassinating Chu Fan was the best method, the fact that Chu Fan had 3 perfected Dharma aspect realm existences by his side was known throughout the entire Eastern region. What if the great Yin dynasty attacks this time with an expert above the Dharma aspect realm? Guojia shook his head after hearing Ouyang Feng's words. When Chu Fan had just asked him, he had already guessed that the great Yin dynasty might have a king realm existence. That's right. This young master just sensed a king realm existence within the great Yin imperial family, and they are probably heading toward this young master now. Without waiting for Ouyang Feng to speak, Chu Fan leisurely looked toward the imperial capital of Great Yin and spoke. He highly agreed with Guojia's speculation. Your Highness, if this is truly the case, then your Highness should leave first, and let us stay behind to deal with the experts of the Great Yin dynasty. Yang Tianzhan showed a worried expression after hearing Chu Fan's words, and then stepped forward resolutely and said, With Yuan Qingdu here, we don't need to worry. After hearing Yang Tianzhan's words, Chu Fan slowly looked toward Yuan Qingdu, who was not far from him, and his voice was filled with confidence. With this humble general here, no one can get half a step close to the heir. Yuan Qingdu also stepped forward cooperatively at this moment, and at the same time, the King Realm aura on his body completely erupted, making him look like a golden armored warrior descending from heaven. This young master naturally trusts General Yuan's strength, and doesn't this young master also have Z by his side? This young master believes Z wouldn't let this young master get hurt, right? Chu Fan then looked toward Xiao Zi and teased her. This girl naturally won't watch you get hurt, but if you want this girl to protect you, you must agree to one of this girl's conditions. Xiao Zi's lips curled up slightly after hearing Chu Fan's words. She looked at Chu Fan with newfound confidence and didn't forget to provoke Ouyang Feng afterward. Yang Tianzhan and Ouyang Tian also recovered their senses at this moment. But when they looked at Yuan Qingdu, both of their faces were filled with shock. They hadn't expected the person standing before them to be an expert above the Dharma aspect realm. At the same time, when they looked at Xiao Zi, their eyes were filled with apprehension and confusion. They didn't know much about Xiao Zi, only that this woman had come to find their heir halfway through the journey. But it seems this woman's identity is not simple. Otherwise, how could she disregard an expert above the Dharma aspect realm? Chapter 151 Summoning Chun Jibao, the terrifying Great Snow Dragon Rider. However, now that they knew Yuan Qingdu's strength had reached the Dharma aspect realm, and that there was a mysterious woman, Yang Tianzhan and Ouyang Tian felt relieved. At this point, both of them had completely pledged allegiance to the Prince of Jinbei's estate, so they naturally couldn't watch their young master put himself in danger. Although it was already guessed that the Great Yin dynasty might send powerful individuals above the Dharma aspect realm to assassinate Chu Fan and the others' marching route remained unchanged, as if they hadn't anticipated this outcome. However, after Yuan Qingdu learned that someone might come to assassinate his young master, he had been constantly by Chu Fan's side, and even Xiao Zi found a reason to stay by Chu Fan's side. Phew, that girl Xiao Zi is really clingy. Inside the tent, Chu Fan took a deep breath, then muttered helplessly. This month's summoning opportunity has arrived. Let's see what kind of character I can summon this time. Finally, a hint of excitement appeared in Chu Fan's eyes, because his summoning opportunity for the month had arrived, so he naturally wanted to see what kind of character he could summon this time. System, activate this month's summoning. With an excited heart, Chu Fan silently chanted to the system. Ding, congratulations, host, for successfully summoning Chun Jibao. As soon as Chu Fan's words fell, the system's voice echoed in his mind. After hearing the system's voice, Chu Fan was completely stunned. Then he showed an excited expression. He hadn't expected the character summoned this time to be the white-clothed soldier immortal from the world of snow. One must know that this individual was known as the white-clothed soldier immortal. His ability to lead troops in battle was in no way inferior to Chen Qingji's. System. Show Chen Jibao's attribute panel. With an excited expression, Chu Fan began to check Chen Jibao's introduction. Chen Jibao, the white-clothed soldier immortal of the world of snow. His cultivation is at the king completion realm. Comes with 10,000 great snow dragon cavalry. The vice general of the great snow dragon cavalry is at the early stage king. 10 centurion generals are at the early phase of the Dharma aspect realm. 100 Akirian generals are from the early stage to perfection of the divine travel realm, and the remaining soldiers are all at the grotto heaven realm. After Chu Fan finished reading the introduction of Chen Jibao and the great snow dragon cavalry, he was completely stunned. He had already guessed that Chen Jibao's cultivation should have reached the king realm, and Chen Jibao's cultivation, as he expected, reached the king completion realm. But what Chu Fan hadn't expected was that Chen Jibao would appear with the great snow dragon cavalry. What made him even more incredulous was the combat power of the great snow dragon cavalry. All of them were cultivators above the grotto heaven realm. Chu Fan couldn't imagine who could stop their advance with such an army. The system is really powerful this time. Just one Chen Jibao was beyond my expectations, not to mention an additional great snow dragon cavalry. From now on, I don't need to fear the Great Yin Dynasty and the other 3 great dynasties. After Chu Fan saw the system's introduction of Chen Jibao and the great snow dragon cavalry, he became extremely excited. If he was worried about the other 3 great dynasties in the eastern region at the beginning, he no longer had any worries now. It could be said that Chu Fan now had the confidence to take down the entire eastern region. Moreover, after taking down the Great Yin Dynasty and establishing an imperial dynasty, he could open the system mall, and then Chu Fan would have more and more powerful individuals under him. System. Summon Chen Jibao and the great snow dragon cavalry. Have them come to see me. At this moment, Chu Fan was already impatient to meet this legendary white-clothed soldier immortal. He silently chanted to the system. Ding! Chen Jibao and the great snow dragon cavalry have been successfully summoned. In half a day, Chen Jibao and the great snow dragon cavalry will come to meet the host. As soon as Chu Fan's words fell, the system's voice reached his ears. After getting the answer he wanted, Chu Fan slowly walked out of the tent. Soon, he arrived at the central main camp. His own living quarters were not far from the central main camp, so in just a moment, he reached the central main camp. Of course, at this time, Qing Yao and Yuan Qingdu were still by Chu Fan's side, accompanying him to the central main camp. This humble general pays respects to the young master. When the generals saw Chu Fan enter, they all bowed towards Chu Fan and spoke, their faces filled with respectful expressions. Chu Fan waved his hand at the generals in front of him, then came to the central position and sat down. Qingji, send 2 generals later to meet a contingent of troops from behind. We will also stop and wait for the arrival of this contingent before continuing our march. After Chu Fan sat down, he slowly looked towards Chen Qingji and gave his order. This humble general obeys. Chen Qingji hadn't expected his young master to come here just to have him receive a contingent of troops. Although he wasn't asked to personally receive them, from the meaning in his young master's words, it was clear that this contingent of troops was definitely not simple. This contingent of troops must be the young master's trump card. Guojian naturally also saw Chu Fan's seriousness about this contingent of troops at this time, so he slowly stood out and spoke towards Chu Fan. The others, upon hearing Guojia's words, also turned their gazes towards Chu Fan, clearly curious about this contingent of troops. You absolutely cannot imagine how powerful this contingent of troops is, but you'll see soon enough. After Chu Fan heard Guojia's words, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he teased Guojia in front of him. May I ask, young master, is it possible that General Zilong's White Horse Volunteers are also no match for this contingent of troops? After Guojia heard Chu Fan's words, he became even more curious. He knew that Zhao Zilong's White Horse Volunteers could be considered one of the strongest armies in the entire eastern region. But from his young master's words, it seemed that this contingent of troops was even more powerful than Zhao Zilong's White Horse Volunteers. Although Zilong's White Horse Volunteers are powerful, they haven't reached the Grotto Heaven realm for every individual. Chu Fan spoke leisurely after hearing Guojia's words. His words completely shocked everyone present, especially the news of every individual being at the Grotto Heaven realm. Young master means that every person in this contingent of troops has a cultivation of at least the Grotto Heaven realm. After Guojia heard Chu Fan's words, he was naturally very shocked, but after the shock, he became even more curious. Yang Tianzhan and the others also looked at Chu Fan with shocked eyes at this time. They had never thought that an army could reach the Grotto Heaven realm for every individual. One must know that those at the Grotto Heaven realm could serve as generals in their army. Indeed, you will know the power of this contingent of troops when they arrive. Chu Fan nodded and admitted it after hearing Guijia's inquiry. In fact, he himself was also very much looking forward to this contingent of troops. Chapter 152, Chun Jibao's arrival, the shock brought by the great snow dragon riders. Half a day quickly passed. During this half-day, Yang Tianzhan, Ouyang Tian, and others eagerly awaited the army that this young master had mentioned. Originally, Chu Fan only needed to instruct a general to wait for this army, but upon learning of its formidable strength, all the generals went to await its arrival. After all, they also wanted to see how powerful the army in this young master's mouth truly was. And because all the generals went to await the army's arrival, Chu Fan, bored, also led Yuan Qingdu and Xingyao to join the others, waiting for Chun Jibao to arrive. Of course, Xiao Zi and Ouyang Feng were also by his side at this time. Xiao Zi's eyes held a hint of curiosity as she looked at the vast open space. As someone from the central region, she naturally knew how powerful the armies in the central region's imperial dynasties were. But as she spent more and more time with Chu Fan, Xiao Zi found it difficult to see through Chu Fan. The strength of his subordinates far exceeded her imagination. It could be said that Xiao Zi felt Chu Fan was not a native of the eastern region, as the strength of Yuan Qingdu, who was by Chu Fan's side, far surpassed that of other people in the eastern region. Moreover, whether it was Zhao, Zilong, or Lu Bu, they were all young. Even if they were placed in the entire central region, they would be considered prodigies. Yet such existences followed Chu Fan. In fact, it wasn't just Xiao Zi who couldn't see through Chu Fan. Even her guardian couldn't see through Chu Fan. One must know that her guardian was a saint-level expert, yet even such an existence could not see through Chu Fan. Just as Xiao Zi was eagerly awaiting the arrival of this army, they suddenly saw a vast expanse of white light appear in front of them. Then, everyone's gaze converged on this vast white light, and at the same time, the entire earth began to shake violently, as if a dragon had turned over. At this moment, everyone also saw clearly that in front of this vast white light, a white-robed general was leading an army, clad entirely in shining silver armor, slowly approaching their direction. Although this army was still very far from them at this time, a terrifying oppressive feeling was already emanating from it. Even Yuan Qingdu, who was by Chu Fan's side, looked at the army in front of them with a solemn gaze, because he sensed an existence not weaker than himself within this army. What kind of army is this? Even from such a distance, the mere aura emanating from it makes me feel a chill. I'm afraid if I were given the same military strength, I wouldn't dare face such an army. Yang Tianzhan looked at the army in front of him with a look of terror. It was only then that he realized what a truly meaningful army was. The power of the army in front of him had probably far exceeded his imagination. Even Ouyang Tian, who stood beside him, had a look of terror in his eyes, because even he couldn't imagine how to defeat this army. Just as everyone was staring at this army with shocked expressions, the army's speed was also extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived not far in front of Chu Fan and the others. At this moment, the appearance of this army was fully revealed before everyone. This was an army clad entirely in shining silver armor. A Bailiang saber hung from their war horses, and they also held a long spear in their hands. In addition to the Bailiang saber hanging from the warhorse, a longbow also hung there, with countless arrows beside it. The general standing at the very front held a long spear, and he looked very refined, but the aura emanating from him was unforgettable, as if he were marshal born for war. This humble general, Chun Jibao, pays respects to this young master. Chun Jibao slowly rode his warhorse to Chu Fan's front. Then he leaped off the warhorse and came before Chu Fan, bowing respectfully and speaking. "We pay respects to your highness." The great snow dragon cavalry behind them also knelt down towards Chu Fan, their terrifying voices echoing throughout the heavens and earth, as if at this moment, only their great snow dragon cavalry remained in the entire world. "Rise, all of you. Jibao, this young master has been waiting for you for a long time." Chu Fan looked at Chun Jibao and the great snow dragon cavalry in front of him, his eyes filled with excitement. He slowly walked forward, held Chun Jibao's hand, and said, "This humble general thanks this young master." Chun Jibao slowly stood up and looked at Chu Fan, his eyes filled with calmness. But within that calm gaze, there was a hint of emotion. "We thank your highness." The great snow dragon cavalry behind them also bowed towards Chu Fan at this time, and then slowly stood up. "Guojia's courtesy name. What do you think of this army?" Chu Fan looked at the great snow dragon cavalry with satisfaction, then slowly turned to Guojia beside him, a hint of playfulness in his eyes. This army is naturally the strongest army your subordinate has ever seen, bar none. The cultivation of any ordinary soldier has reached the Grotto Heaven realm. This is a 10,000-man army composed of Grotto Heaven realm cultivators. I'm afraid even a million-strong army couldn't stop such an army. Guoji's face broke into a smile after hearing Chu Fan's words. Then he looked at the army in front of him with excitement. It could be said that the great snow dragon cavalry in front of them was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Even a million-strong army, in front of this army, probably couldn't stop their advance. Where did you get this army? Even many armies in the imperial dynasties of the central region can't compare to this army. Zhao Zi also recovered from her shock at this moment, then looked at Chu Fan curiously and asked. As the saintess designate of the Taishan Holy Land in the central region, Zhao Zi had naturally seen the armies in those imperial dynasties of the central region. She just hadn't expected such a powerful army to come from the eastern region. One must know that even the armies in those imperial dynasties of the central region probably couldn't compare to this army. Of course, if it were the armies in the immortal dynasties of the central region, then they would far surpass the army in front of them. After all, the most elite White Phoenix Iron Cavalry of the Great Phoenix Immortal Dynasty, one of the strongest immortal dynasties in the central region, was an army composed of King Realm cultivators. It could be said that the White Phoenix Iron Cavalry was one of the strongest armies in the central region. I cultivated them. Do you believe me? Chu Fan looked at Zhao Zi in front of him and spoke leisurely. He naturally wouldn't say that this army was summoned by him from a system. Chapter 153, The Ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty arrives. Yuan Qingdu makes his move. After Zhao Zi heard Chu Fan's words, she immediately rolled her eyes at him. She was not foolish enough to believe that the eastern region could cultivate such a powerful army. However, since Chu Fan refused to speak, she would not continue to question him. Can such an army truly be defeated? Yang Tianzhan and Ouyang Feng exchanged glances, both reading the same message in the other's eyes. Could any other army defeat this one? Of course, they already had the answer in their hearts. Such an army was already invincible. They feared that if Chu Fan led this army through the Great Yin Dynasty right now, even if the Great Yin Dynasty exhausted all its resources, it would be unable to stop them. All right, let's go back and hold a welcoming feast for Zhibao. Chu Fan naturally took in the gazes and expressions of everyone present. He stepped forward and slowly addressed the crowd. We obey the command. The generals, who were still in shock, snapped back to reality after hearing Chu Fan's words, and then solemnly bowed to Chu Fan. Chen Zhibao then turned his gaze toward Yuan Qingdu, who was standing beside Chu Fan. He sensed a surge of battle intent emanating from Yuan Qingdu. Your strength is truly impressive. You have the power to fight me. Chen Zhibao slowly approached Yuan Qingdu and spoke, his face showing a serious expression mixed with battle intent. You are very strong. Even I might not be able to defeat you. Yuan Qingdu nodded seriously to Chen Zhibao after hearing his words. At this moment, he naturally understood his own strength. He might be able to fight Chen Zhibao, but he was not necessarily his opponent. After hearing Yuan Qingdu's words, Chen Zhibao nodded at him, then followed closely behind Chu Fan, slowly heading toward the direction of the camp. As for Yang Tianzhan and Ouyang Tian, they were even more shocked after hearing the conversation between the two men. Before this, they had known that the strength of Yuan Qingdu had surpassed the Dharma idol stage. But now, hearing the dialogue between Yuan Qingdu and Chen Zhibao, they realized that Chen Zhibao's strength had also reached at least a level above the Dharma idol stage. In other words, from this moment on, they had two masters whose strength surpassed the Dharma idol stage. What Yang Tianzhan and Ouyang Tian did not know was that there was also a king realm existence within the Great Dragon Snow Cavalry. If they knew that, they would probably be even more shocked. After Chen Zhibao joined, Chu Fan and his army continued their march, which did not speed up because of Chen Zhibao's addition. Soon, the army continued marching for several days. During these days, because the Great Yin imperial family had recalled nearly all its troops to the imperial capital, Chu Fan's army did not encounter much resistance. They quickly captured the cities along their route. In just a few days, Chu Fan and his forces had conquered more than 10 cities. On this day, Chu Fan and the others were resting in a city as usual. They were now not far from the imperial capital of Great Yin. They only needed a few more days to reach the imperial capital of Great Yin. The pitch-black night quickly descended, and Chu Fan was resting in this city. Just within the deep darkness, several dark figures suddenly darted out. All these figures were heading toward Chu Fan's room. Chen Zhibao, who had been in secluded cultivation in the military camp, suddenly opened his eyes. He then quickly picked up the long spear beside him and rapidly flew out. His entire body seemed to transform into a streak of light, flying toward Chu Fan's location. Yuan Qingdu, who was guarding Chu Fan outside his door, also opened his eyes. He stared fiercely at the dark night sky, while tightly gripping the weapon in his hand. However, Yuan Qingdu did not immediately leave the area outside Chu Fan's room. Instead, he staunchly guarded his spot, not moving half a step. Which juniors dare to come out and die? Nevertheless, his voice spread throughout the entire city. Yuan Qingdu intended to warn others that someone was attempting to assassinate their young lord. Just as Yuan Qingdu's voice faded, 3 figures appeared before him. These 3 figures were the 3 old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty. We didn't expect that Chu Fan, this little one, would have a king realm existence by his side. But do you think you alone can withstand our attack? Those who dare touch the young lord shall die. Yuan Qingdu naturally sensed that the cultivation of the 3 individuals before him had all reached the king realm. However, he did not fear the 3 king realm cultivators in front of him. Instead, a trace of battle intent appeared on his face as he spoke to the 3 men. After Yuan Qingdu finished speaking, the late king realm aura belonging to him completely erupted. His entire being was like a golden war general in the night sky. We didn't expect your cultivation to have reached the late king realm. However, there are 3 of us. If the 3 of us join forces, you are bound to fall. It is still not too late to retreat now. The old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty was also somewhat surprised when he sensed the aura emanating from Yuan Qingdu. The strongest among the 3 of them was only at the middle king realm, while the other 2 were merely at the early stage king. However, they believed they could defeat Yuan Qingdu by joining forces. Furthermore, even if the 3 of them couldn't defeat Yuan Qingdu, they could still assassinate Chu Fan. They only needed 1 person to hold back Yuan Qingdu, or even 2 people stall him. At that point, killing Chu Fan, who did not possess king realm cultivation, would be effortless. 3 old men who haven't even reached the late king realm dare to threaten General Yuan, truly courting death. Just as the old man's voice fell, a sound slowly drifted from afar. Then, a man wearing silver armor and holding a long spear slowly appeared before everyone. This person was Chun Jibao, who had just sensed the aura of the 3 men. In just a few breaths, Chun Jibao appeared beside Yuan Qingdu. I'll leave those 3 to you. Entrust the safety of the young lord to me. Chun Jibao arrived next to Yuan Qingdu, but had no intention of attacking. Instead, he calmly spoke to Yuan Qingdu, believing that Yuan Qingdu could handle the 3 of them. Yuan Qingdu nodded after hearing Chun Jibao's words. Then his entire body radiated terrifying battle intent, and he charged toward the 3 men with a weapon in his hand. Terrifying battle intent instantly enveloped the entire city. Yuan Qingdu then swung his polearm toward the 3 men, and a horrifying force swept through the entire space. Chapter 154, The Powerful Yuan Qingdu and the Great Yin Dynasty Ancestors' Fear. The old ancestor of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty had not expected Chu Fan to have 2 king realm cultivators by his side. Moreover, one of them had already reached the late king realm. And as for the other, although they couldn't sense his realm, based on the oppressive aura Chun Jibao exuded, they knew that his cultivation was at least late king realm. It might even have reached the legendary king completion realm, or even a realm beyond the king realm. At this point, the 3 old ancestors of the Great Yin felt a bad premonition and also had the intention to retreat. However, Yuan Qingdu would not give them such an opportunity. The main reason he hadn't made a move earlier was that he feared these fellows might launch a sneak attack on his young master. But now, with Chun Jibao, a strong cultivator in the king completion realm, protecting his young master, Yuan Qingdu had no worries. So, he directly wielded his golden halberd, charging towards the 3 old ancestors of the Great Yin like a god of war. Seeing Yuan Qingdu's demeanor, the 3 old ancestors of the Great Yin knew that if they didn't fight, they probably wouldn't be able to escape. Thus, the 3 of them took out their weapons. After all, the 3 of them were the pillars of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty, so the weapons they used were not ordinary. The middle stage King Realm Elder held a spiked mace. As for the other 2 early stage King Realm Elders, their weapons were 2 different greatswords. One was an azure greatsword, and the other was a flowing golden greatsword. As the 3 old ancestors of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty took out their weapons, they jointly engaged Yuan Qingdu in a fierce battle. Yuan Qingdu, being called the foremost warrior of the Sui and Tang dynasties, was not an empty boast. With a single powerful strike, he instantly sent the early stage King Realm Elder of the Great Yin, who was blocking him, flying with his halberd. The immense power was something this early stage King Realm Old Ancestor of the Great Yin could not withstand, and the great sword in his hand trembled continuously, as if it could fall off at any moment. Yuan Qingdu, who had sent this Great Yin Old Ancestor flying, did not stop his movements. He once again thrust his golden halberd forward. The terrifying power seemed to tear apart the entire space. Seeing this scene, the Middle Stage King Realm Old Ancestor of the Great Yin also showed a look of shock in his eyes, not expecting the man in golden chainmail before him to be so terrifying. However, no matter how shocked he was by Yuan Qingdu's strength at this moment, he could only helplessly use the weapon in his hand to block Yuan Qingdu's attack. The next second, Yuan Qingdu's golden halberd collided with the spiked mace in the hands of this great Yin Imperial Dynasty Old Ancestor. The moment of impact created a strong vibration throughout the air. At the same time, a destructive force continuously spread outwards. The surrounding buildings were all destroyed upon contact with this force. When Chen Zhibao saw this force coming towards him, he merely waved his hand lightly, and then the force dissipated before him. And the old ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty, who held the spiked mace, was sent flying like a cannonball by this terrifying force, then slammed heavily onto the ground. Instantly, a deep crater was left in the ground. After doing all this, Yuan Qingdu immediately turned his gaze to the last old ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty, then without hesitation, continued to charge forward with the golden halberd in his hand. At this moment, the old ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty had a look of terror in his eyes. He hadn't expected the man before him to be so powerful. Coming to his senses, he instantly transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from his original spot. In just a few breaths, this old ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty appeared several miles away. Seeing that he had escaped, the old ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief, then took a deep breath as he looked back. "Old man, are you looking for me?" Just as this old ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty thought he had escaped, Yuan Qingdu's voice faintly came from before him. So, he looked in the direction of the voice with some disbelief, and then he saw Yuan Qingdu looking at him with a playful expression. Before he could react, Yuan Qingdu's golden halberd had already smashed towards him. The terrifying force instantly sent him flying. Just as Yuan Qingdu was about to make a move to finish off this old ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty, the other two old ancestors of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty also arrived beside him. They looked at Yuan Qingdu with grave expressions in their eyes. "May I ask where this fellow Taoist comes from?" This old man advised his fellow Taoist not to interfere in the matters between us and the Prince of Jinbei's estate. The forces behind us are not as simple as fellow Taoist imagines. The Middle Stage King Realm Elder of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty slowly stepped forward and spoke to Yuan Qingdu. At this moment, he tried to use the forces behind him to intimidate Yuan Qingdu. "No matter what forces stand behind you, those who attempt to assassinate my young master shall die." Yuan Qingdu heard the words of this Middle Stage King Realm Old Ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty and immediately replied, without any hesitation. Yuan Qingdu naturally wouldn't care about the forces behind these people. He only knew that anyone who dared to harm his young master would be killed. Does fellow Taoist really want to be an enemy of the forces behind us? You should know that there are saint-grade strong cultivators among the forces behind us. After hearing Yuan Qingdu's words, this Middle Stage King Realm Old Ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty also showed a hint of killing intent in his eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. Then he looked at Yuan Qingdu with a hateful expression. "Those who dare to covet the young master shall die." Yuan Qingdu wouldn't care about so much. He looked at the three old ancestors of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty before him with killing intent in his eyes. And at the same time, the aura of his late king realm pressed down on the three old ancestors of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty. "Since that's the case, then you shall die for me." The old ancestor of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty hadn't expected Yuan Qingdu to actually intend to fight them to the death, so he wielded the spiked mace in his hand and fiercely struck towards Yuan Qingdu. The terrifying force instantly tore apart the entire surrounding space. And the other two old ancestors of the great Yin Imperial Dynasty also wielded their weapons and charged towards Yuan Qingdu. Although they knew that they couldn't defeat Yuan Qingdu by themselves, they didn't believe that even with the three of them working together, they couldn't defeat Yuan Qingdu. Chapter 155, A Terrifying Battle, and the excited young Tianzhan and his companions. Under the joint attack of the three King Realm cultivators, the entire space trembled, as if the sky could no longer withstand their combined effort. However, Yuan Qingdu, who was facing them, showed no worry, instead charging straight in, holding his golden halberd. The four quickly began fighting. The resulting fluctuations from the battle soon spread throughout the entire city, instantly drawing everyone's gaze toward the sky. They could only see a man wearing golden battle armor battling three elders, and the aura emanating from the man in golden battle armor sent chills down everyone's spines. The cultivators nearby were even sent flying by the fluctuations of their battle, and many people died directly because of the shock waves produced by this fight. What a terrifying battle. What level of figures are fighting here? They must be masters of the spirit roaming realm, or perhaps even masters of the Dharma aspect realm, far surpassing the spirit roaming realm. Otherwise, how could their battle be so terrifying? I recognize that golden armored general. He is the young master's personal guard. I suspect these 3 elders are here to assassinate the young master. These 3 elders must be tired of living, daring to assassinate the young master. You must know that the young master is protected by 3 perfected Dharma aspect realm experts. These 3 elders must be the old ancestors of the great Yin dynasty. Otherwise, how could they dare come to assassinate the young master? We don't care if they are old ancestors of the great Yin dynasty or not. Anyone who dares to assassinate the young master must fall. The cultivators below began discussing the battle above, and at the same time, these cultivators completely sided with the prince of Jinbei's estate. After all, in their view, the great Yin dynasty had no chance of victory. In the future, the entire great Yin dynasty would belong to the prince of Jinbei's estate, and as the sole young master of the prince of Jinbei's estate, Chu Fan would be the master of this land. Therefore, these cultivators were naturally very respectful toward Chu Fan. Zhao, how long do you think Yuan Qingdu will need to end the fight? While the battle outside was ongoing, Chu Fan, who was in the courtyard, also looked toward the battlefield. He then slowly turned his head and asked Chen Zhao, who was beside him. For Chu Fan, he believed Yuan Qingdu could definitely defeat the 3 old ancestors of the great Yin dynasty before him. However, what he was currently anticipating was how long Yuan Qingdu would need to defeat these 3 old ancestors of the great Yin dynasty. Given General Yuan's strength, he should need the time it takes for an incense stick to burn a deal with these 3 old ancestors of the great Yin dynasty. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Chen Zhao slowly raised his head, looked toward the figure in golden battle armor at the center of the battlefield, and spoke slowly. As a King Completion Realm cultivator, he could naturally see that Yuan Qingdu's current strength was no weaker than the King Completion Realm. Although his opponents were 3 King Realm cultivators, even so, these 3 King Realm old ancestors of the great Yin dynasty were still no match for Yuan Qingdu. Judging by the current situation, these 3 old ancestors of the great Yin dynasty should only be able to hold out for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Yuan Qingdu is indeed the #1 warrior under this young master's command. He has not failed this young master's expectations. After hearing Chen Zhibao's words, a smile spread across Chu Fan's lips. Chu Fan was quite fond of Yuan Qingdu. Although Chen Zhibao was currently the strongest person he had summoned, Chu Fan knew that Chen Zhibao's greatest use was on the battlefield. As the heavenly treasure general from the Sui and Tang world, Chu Fan naturally kept Yuan Qingdu by his side as a personal guard. At this moment, it wasn't just Chu Fan and the others who were paying attention to the battle above. Yang Tianzhan, Ouyang Tian, and the rest also came outside the courtyard to watch the fight in the sky. The strength of this General Yuan is truly terrifying. Even if the 2 of us entered a battlefield like this, we probably wouldn't be able to withstand a single move. Ouyang Tian looked at the battle in the sky with a face full of shock. He then slowly turned his head and spoke to Yang Tianzhan, though a hint of excitement could be seen in his eyes. You are mistaken. If the 2 of us entered a battle like this, the fluctuations generated by their fight alone would probably be enough to wipe us out. Yang Tianzhan naturally had a look of shock on his face at this moment. He had not expected their General Yuan to possess such terrifying strength. One must know that those 3 from the Great Yin dynasty were all King Realm existences. Yet, even with the combined efforts of 3 King Realm masters, they were only fighting General Yuan to a draw. Didn't this mean that General Yuan's strength had far surpassed these 3 King Realm old ancestors of Great Yin? Father, are those 3 the King Realm old ancestors of the Great Yin dynasty? Yang Wu also had a look of shock on his face at this moment, and he eagerly questioned Yang Tianzhan beside him. That's right. Those 3 should be the King Realm old ancestors of the Great Yin dynasty. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to hold out against General Yuan. Yang Tianzhan nodded after hearing his son's words, then watched the battle in the sky intently. He naturally wouldn't miss a battle between King Realm masters. He had never witnessed such a fight before. However, the excitement in the hearts of Yang Tianzhan and Ouyang Tian now far exceeded what they felt initially. With such a powerful General Yuan on their side, would taking down the entire Great Yin dynasty still be difficult? This Yuan Qingdu truly is an unparalleled prodigy. If a person like him were in my Taishan Holy Land, he would likely be a saint-level existence. A man in black robe stood beside Xiao Zi. Watching Yuan Qingdu's battle in the sky, the man in black robe spoke slowly. Is Yuan Qingdu's strength really that formidable? Xiao Zi asked the man in black robe with increased curiosity after hearing his words. Yes. Although Yuan Qingdu's cultivation is only the late king realm, his actual strength has already reached the king completion realm. He even has the power to fight a true king initial stage cultivator. The man in black robe nodded lightly after hearing Xiao Zi's words. At the same time, he realized he hadn't finished what he was saying. Yuan Qingdu's age was not considered old even within the entire Taishan Holy Land. One must know that an ordinary person who breaks through to the king realm before the age of 50 is considered a decent prodigy. Yet, Yuan Qingdu, who is only in his 30s, has already reached this level of strength. Therefore, even in the eastern region, he can be considered a prodigy and an unparalleled prodigy at that. Chapter 156, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu simultaneously enter the king realm, summoning characters to be unsealed. In fact, what shocked the man in black robe even more was that Chu Fan had so many prodigy-level figures by his side. Whether it was Chun Jibao or Zhao Zilong and the others, in the eyes of the man in black robe, they could all be considered prodigies. Perhaps the talent of Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu couldn't compare to Yuan Qingdu, but in the eyes of the man in black robe, they were still decent existences. Even if Zhao Zilong, Lu Bu, and the others were in their Taishan Holy Land, they could serve as true disciples. One must know that the entire Taishan Holy Land only had a few hundred true disciples. Yet now, several of Chu Fan's subordinates could reach the level of true disciples in the Taishan Holy Land, and among them, Yuan Qingdu and Chun Jibao could even contend for the position of saint. In fact, what the man in black didn't know was that Zhao Zilong, Lu Bu, and the others' cultivation levels lagged behind Yuan Qingdu because they had been summoned earlier. If Chu Fan had summoned them only now, then Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu's cultivation would likely have also reached the king realm. After all, the two of them were the peak existences in the entire Three Kingdoms era, and in the historical romance, Lu Bu was universally recognized as the strongest in the Three Kingdoms, while Zhao Zilong was recognized as the second strongest. On the other side, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were also paying attention to the great battle in the sky. As they watched the great battle in the sky, the chi emanating from their bodies continuously surged, as if the battle in the sky had provided them with inspiration. The two, who were originally only at the middle stage of the Dharma body realm, instantly had their cultivation reach the late Dharma aspect stage. Furthermore, even after reaching the late Dharma aspect stage, their cultivation continued to rise. Chu Fan, who was in the small courtyard, naturally sensed the surging chi coming from Zhao Zilong and the other man. So he immediately looked in the direction of Zhao Zilong and the other man. System, what is going on? Why is the chi coming from Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu continuously increasing? Chu Fan felt this was unbelievable, because even if Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu improved because of this great battle, they wouldn't improve this much, so he immediately questioned the system. Ding! Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu prematurely released their sealed strength because they were watching this great battle, which is why the chi emanating from their bodies is continuously increasing. What does releasing the seal mean? Chu Fan immediately grasped the crucial part of the system's explanation this time, so he frowned and questioned the system again. Ding! Because the host was weak at the beginning, the summoned characters had not reached their peak period. Therefore, they were in a seal state at that time. After the host establishes an imperial dynasty, he can exchange for a seal release card to release their full strength. Currently, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu are in the process of having their strength released. Of course, this is only the first release. Their strength can be released again. As soon as Chu Fan finished speaking, the system's explanation sounded once more. After hearing the system's explanation, Chu Fan instantly understood what it meant. If that's the case, then can Yuan Qingdu also have his strength released? Chu Fan suddenly looked toward Yuan Qingdu in the sky, then asked the system with expectant eyes. He cannot. The system's answer completely excited Chu Fan. He hadn't expected that Yuan Qingdu, who had already reached the late king realm, could also have his strength released. Just how powerful would Yuan Qingdu be after his strength was released? At the same time that Chu Fan was communicating with the system, the cultivation of Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu on the other side reached the perfected Dharma aspect realm, and they did not stop even after reaching the perfected Dharma aspect realm. As the great battle continued, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu's cultivation finally reached the king realm. Ultimately, Zhao Zilong's cultivation reached the early stage king, not far from the middle king realm. Meanwhile, the cultivation of Lu Bu next to him reached the middle king realm. After their cultivation finished rising, the two exchanged a glance. Then both turned their gazes toward the great battle in the sky. The increase in the two men's cultivation naturally attracted the attention of the man in black beside Xiao Zi. How is this possible? improving by almost an entire major realm in an instant. How did they manage that? The man in black beside Zhao Zi looked disbelievingly at the location of Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu. When he first sensed the qi emanating from Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu increasing, he was already surprised. But at that time, he didn't pay it much mind. After all, gaining a minor realm improvement by watching a great battle was a basic occurrence for an ordinary prodigy, so he wasn't too concerned. However, when the cultivation of Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong continued to rise, the man in black couldn't stay seated anymore. Moreover, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu's cultivation had jumped directly from the middle stage of the Dharma Body realm to the early stage king and the middle king realm, respectively. He had never witnessed such a thing before. Could it be that they comprehended the Tao, which is why they improved so much? Zhao Zi also had a look of shock on her face, but after recovering, she had a guess in her heart, so she immediately voiced her conjecture. Comprehending the Tao? How could they comprehend it so easily? After all, that is a legendary, once-in-a-lifetime event. After hearing Zhao Zi's words, the man in black looked disbelievingly in the direction of Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong, though at this moment, he was clearly starting to believe Zhao Zi's words. After all, if it wasn't the legendary comprehension of the Tao, then what else could explain why Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu's cultivation had increased so dramatically? It couldn't possibly be because the two of them had been hiding their cultivation, right? But since they were only at the middle stage of the Dharma Body realm, even Lu Bu, who had now reached the Middle King realm, couldn't possibly hide his cultivation from him. Two more saint-level prodigies. Where exactly does Chu Fan come from? How can he possibly have so many saint-level prodigies by his side? The man in black now cast his gaze toward Chu Fan. At this moment, he felt that Chu Fan was extremely mysterious. Just a few subordinates by his side had already reached the saint level. Initially, the man in black's impression of Chu Fan changed because Chu Fan possessed the innate Dao Body. But after staying by Chu Fan's side for so long, he felt that Chu Fan was not as simple as he had imagined. After all, in the entire eastern region, who could bring forth such powerful prodigies? One must know that besides Chu Fan and the Prince of Jinbei's estate, the strongest prodigy in the eastern region was currently only at the divine power realm. Such prodigies were abundant in the central region. One could even say that the prodigies on the eastern region's prodigy ranking didn't even qualify to enter their Taishan Holy Land. However, Chu Fan's appearance broke all these rules. All of his subordinates were existences who could enter the Taishan Holy Land, and within the Taishan Holy Land, they could at least reach the level of intersect disciple or true disciple. Chapter 157, The Escape of the Three Ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty, The Ultimate Flying Knife. While Zhao Zi and her guardian were still reeling in shock, Yuan Qingdu had already seized the advantage. The three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty facing him were now at a disadvantage under his terrifying suppression. Yuan Qingdu, like a demon god, continuously suppressed the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty below. Yuan Qingdu's image, clad in golden armor, instantly imprinted itself upon everyone's minds. Yuan Qingdu casually unleashed a move that the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty below could not withstand, and the immense power directly sent the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty flying. At this moment, the eyes of the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty were filled with disbelief as they looked at Yuan Qingdu. They had not expected this man in golden armor before them to possess such terrifying strength. It wasn't that the three of them hadn't jointly battled late King realm experts before, but those cultivators seemed so insignificant in front of Yuan Qingdu. To dare assassinate my heir of the Prince of Jinbei's estate with just this, you truly have a death wish. Yuan Qingdu looked scornfully at the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty before him. Then he once again raised the golden halberd in his hand and charged toward the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty. The terrifying pressure caused the entire sky to tremble violently. Fellow Taoist, do you really intend to exterminate us? The Middle King realm old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty couldn't help but shout angrily as he watched Yuan Qingdu charging toward him. At this moment, the eyes of this Middle King realm old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty were also filled with terror and unwillingness. He had originally thought that dealing with the so-called heir of the Prince of Jinbei's estate would be quick, but he hadn't expected such a terrifying existence to be by the heir of the Prince of Jinbei's estate side. The old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty was no longer thinking about how to eliminate Chu Fan, the heir of the Prince of Jinbei's estate, but rather how to survive this great battle. As an old monster who had lived for hundreds or thousands of years, he naturally wouldn't sacrifice his life over a trivial matter. Moreover, this old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty knew that Chu Fan had an existence even more powerful than the man in golden armor before him, so he naturally couldn't risk trying to assassinate Chu Fan again. After hearing the words of the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty, Yuan Qingdu did not stop his actions. Instead, he continued charging toward this old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty. He did not put this old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty in his eyes at all. Seeing Yuan Qingdu's demeanor, the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty knew that Yuan Qingdu would not spare him. So he instantly transformed into a streak of light, trying to escape Yuan Qingdu's sight. When the other two old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty saw that this old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty had fled, they exchanged glances and immediately began fleeing in different directions. They wouldn't be foolish enough to flee in the same direction, as that would only make things easier for Yuan Qingdu. Their plan was indeed successful. Yuan Qingdu frowned upon seeing the three figures vanish, transforming into three afterimages. Although his strength was formidable and he could easily defeat the three of them, they were now fleeing in three different directions, and he couldn't split himself into three to chase them all. Yuan Qingdu, the Middle King realm old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty, is yours. Leave the remaining two to Zilong and Lu Bu. Just as Yuan Qingdu was still hesitating, a voice suddenly rang out in the night sky, and then Chu Fan appeared not far from Yuan Qingdu. Your subordinate obeys. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Yuan Qingdu immediately chased after the Middle King realm old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty without hesitation. Zhao, Zilong, and Lu Bu, who had just achieved a breakthrough, quickly turned into two streaks of light, chasing after the other two old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty respectively. The three figures quickly vanished between heaven and earth. On the other side, the Middle King realm old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that no one was pursuing him. How could a mere prince of Jinbei's estate possess so many powerful existences? He slowed his pace, glanced behind him, and spoke with a look of disbelief. He still hadn't recovered from the shock. When they originally came here to kill Chu Fan, they thought it would be easy, but now they realized that the prince of Jinbei's estate was not as simple as they imagined. Because the man in golden armor was considered a powerful existence even in their sect, not to mention that the man in golden armor was young. When he matured, he would definitely surpass them. No. He already surpassed them now. Just as this old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty was pondering how to deal with the prince of Jinbei's estate, a golden light streaked across the sky, and a terrifying aura whistled toward him. Damn it, he actually caught up. Feeling this terrifying yet familiar aura, a look of hatred appeared on the face of the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty. He then quickly sped up, flying toward the imperial capital of Great Yin. But how could he possibly outrun Yuan Qingdu? In just a few breaths, Yuan Qingdu stood before him like a war god, looking cruelly at the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty. Run? Why aren't you running anymore? Looking at the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty before him, a scornful smile appeared on Yuan Qingdu's face. Fellow Taoist, do you really not intend to spare us? You should know that the sect behind us has a saint entry-level expert. Aren't you afraid of a saint entry-level master coming to find trouble with fellow Taoist? The old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty looked at Yuan Qingdu before him, wishing he could tear him into 10,000 pieces. But he also knew that he was no match for Yuan Qingdu, so he began to threaten Yuan Qingdu. This was already his last chance. If Yuan Qingdu wasn't even afraid of the sect behind him, then he truly might die here today. This general said that anyone who dares to disrespect the heir of the prince of Jinbei's estate shall be killed. Yuan Qingdu looked at the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty before him without changing his attitude in the slightest, instead speaking seriously. The old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty's face darkened upon hearing Yuan Qingdu's words. He then quickly pulled out a flying knife from his spatial ring, and the knife shot toward Yuan Qingdu's face like lightning. Feeling a threat rushing toward him, Yuan Qingdu quickly dodged. The next second, the flying knife grazed past his cheek, even severing a lock of his hair. What a terrifying flying knife. Even I almost didn't react in time. Looking at the lock of hair that had fallen, a trace of shock appeared in Yuan Qingdu's eyes. Chapter 158. Yuan slays the enemy in Qingdu, Zhao Zilong's strength. The flying dagger, having failed to strike Yuan Qingdu, immediately disappeared into the air as if it had never appeared. However, Yuan Qingdu was able to accurately pinpoint the location of this flying dagger. This flying dagger currently seemed eager to try again. As for the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty opposite Yuan Qingdu, he stared at Yuan Qingdu with an expression of disbelief, because his flying dagger was extraordinary. It had once injured beings at the King Completion realm, yet now it was easily dodged by the golden armored general, who was only at the late King realm, standing before him. This instantly made him feel doubled pressure. because that flying dagger could only injure cultivators with a higher realm than him if it struck unexpectedly. But now that Yuan Qingdu had started to take precautions, it meant his flying dagger had lost its effectiveness. Now his most powerful trump card had failed, which was why the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty felt the pressure intensify. "This thing is decent, but trying to injure me with it won't be easy," Yuan Qingdu said. Yuan Qingdu looked at the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty before him and spoke slowly. After speaking, he waved his left hand, and a terrifying suction force was released from it. Subsequently, the flying dagger hidden in the space turned into a silver light and appeared in his hand. Clearly, Yuan Qingdu, having just located the flying dagger, already had plans for it. After the flying dagger landed in Yuan Qingdu's hand, he began examining it. The flying dagger in Yuan Qingdu's hand was forged from unknown materials, radiating cold light, and was much better than the mace wielded by the great Yin Imperial Dynasty's old ancestor. It was clearly a rare weapon. Looking at the flying dagger in his hand, Yuan Qingdu forcibly used his power to sever its connection with the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty, and then threw it into his storage ring. Only after completing all of this did he turn his gaze towards the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty before him. At this moment, the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty's face was terribly gloomy. In that instant, he felt that his connection with the flying dagger had been severed. In other words, the golden armored general before him had completely cut off his connection to the flying dagger. Yuan Qingdu ignored the gloomy expression on the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty's face, instead directly raising the golden halberd in his hand and charging toward the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty. A terrifying force directly struck the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty, and a golden beam of light instantly streaked across the sky. Seeing this, the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty hurriedly used the mace in his hand to block the move, but at this point, he alone was naturally no match for Yuan Qingdu. With just a single collision, he was sent flying, and the mace in his hand flew out. Seeing this, Yuan Qingdu had no intention of holding back. He continued to charge toward the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty. In the span of just a few moves, Yuan Qingdu killed the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty before him. After killing the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty, Yuan Qingdu headed back in the direction he came from. Only the corpse of the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty remained, silently lying in this desolate area. No one knew that a powerhouse of the King realm had fallen here in such a lonely manner. On the other side, Zhao Zilong had also caught up to another old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty. He stood rigidly upright before the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty. The old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty sighed helplessly upon seeing Zhao Zilong before him. Yet at the same time, his eyes held a hint of expectation. Since Zhao Zilong was not the golden armored general who had just defeated them, he was not overly afraid. "Who are you?" Looking at Zhao Zilong in his silver armor, the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty showed a hint of appreciation on his face, and then he slowly spoke to Zhao Zilong. "White Horse Silver Spear Zhao Zilong, under the command of a young master." White Horse Silver Spear Zhao Zilong, a fine title, but today you will fall here. The old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty nodded slightly after hearing Zhao Zilong's words, and then his eyes gradually sharpened. In the next second, he raised the broadsword in his hand and slashed toward Zhao Zilong. This strike contained terrifying power, instantly tearing the entire space. At the same time, an azure dragon could faintly be seen coiling behind him. This azure dragon was awe-inspiring without needing to display anger. Seeing this scene, Zhao Zilong naturally struck decisively. He quickly thrust out the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear in his hand. In the next second, a faint phoenix cry could be heard. Following this, a golden phoenix appeared behind Zhao Zilong. After this golden phoenix appeared, its eyes quietly fixed upon the azure dragon behind the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty. Its eyes held contempt and disdain. In the next second, the weapons in their hands collided. The golden phoenix and the azure dragon in the sky also collided at this moment. The moment they collided, terrifying flames engulfed the azure dragon. Only a miserable scream echoed across the sky. In the next second, the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty instantly flew backward from the fight. After retreating several miles, the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty finally stopped. At this point, his hands gripping the broadsword were trembling incessantly. He stared at Zhao Zilong before him, his eyes filled with malice. "So weak." Zhao Zilong looked at the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasty before him with some confusion. He hadn't expected that although his cultivation was the same as the old ancestor of the great Yin dynasties, the person before him couldn't even withstand a single move. This made Zhao Zilong, who had just achieved a breakthrough to the King realm and wanted to practice, lose interest. This man's strength is too terrifying. Now is not the time to confront him directly. Unlike Zhao Zilong, the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty knew he was likely no match for the silver-armored general before him, so he began pondering how to escape. When he saw that Zhao Zilong did not choose to strike at him immediately, he knew his chance had come. He instantly transformed into a streak of azure light and tore through the sky. Trying to escape from under my hand? You probably won't succeed. Zhao Zilong looked at the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty, who had turned into a streak of azure light and disappeared from the spot, and spoke slowly. Immediately after, he transformed into a streak of silver light and gave chase. In the next second, a streak of azure light and a streak of silver light appeared in the sky, piercing the dark night. Chapter 159. The three ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty have perished, and the founding emperor Murong Zhantian. At the same time, Lu Bu, on the other side, also caught up to another old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty. Unlike Zhao Zilong, after catching up to this old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty, Lu Bu immediately unleashed his heavenly halberd. He descended before the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty like a demon god descending upon the world. The heavenly halberd in his hand was swung densely, leaving no opening. With just one terrifying blow, he directly sent the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty flying. At the same time, a purplish-black figure appeared behind Lu Bu, standing like a demon god. This was Lu Bu's manifestation. Demon god manifestation. Who are you? The old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty's pupils contracted when he saw Lu Bu before him, and he asked unwillingly. The demon god Lu Bu, serving the young master. Lu Bu looked contemptuously at the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty before him, then spoke haughtily to the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty. His eyes were filled with scorn and disdain. After speaking, Lu Bu immediately raised the heavenly halberd in his hand and charged toward the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty. The terrifying power seemed to crush the entire sky. In just a few breaths, Lu Bu dealt with the old ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty before him. An hour quickly passed, and Yuan Qingdu, Lu Bu, and Zhao Zilong also returned one after another. The first to return was naturally Yuan Qingdu, the second was Lu Bu, and Zhao Zilong was the last. However, all three who returned had successfully slain the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty. After Chu Fan learned that the three had successfully slain the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty, he nodded in satisfaction, and then everyone returned to their residences to rest. After all, they still had to launch an attack on the city ahead tomorrow, while Chu Fan's side was slaying the three old ancestors of the Great Yin Dynasty. At this moment, in the imperial capital of Great Yin, the fifth ancestor of Great Yin, who had been full of anticipation, watched as the jade tablets before him shattered one after another, and an expression of disbelief appeared on his face. Even Murong Li, who was standing beside him, was completely thrown into panic because both of them knew what the jade tablets represented. Three old ancestors have fallen? How is this possible? Murong Li stared blankly at the jade tablets, lost in thought. It took him a good while to recover before he spoke with a look of disbelief. I never thought the Prince of Jinbei's estate's strength was so terrifying. Have even three experts of the King realm been slain? The fifth ancestor of Great Yin also looked at the scene before him in disbelief, and when he looked in the direction of the Prince of Jinbei's estate, a look of dread appeared on his face. He hadn't expected the Great Yin Dynasty to fail this time. After all, the Great Yin Dynasty had deployed three King realm existences. It seems we ultimately underestimated the Prince of Jinbei's estate. A look of resentment appeared on Murong Li's face, and at the same time, his heart was filled with panic. After all, since their three King realm old ancestors had already fallen, the next thing awaiting them would be the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate. At that time, he, the Emperor of the Great Yin Dynasty, would naturally not escape being slain by the Prince of Jinbei's estate. Old ancestor, what should we do now? Thinking that he might be slain, a look of fear appeared in Murong Li's eyes, and he asked the fifth ancestor of Great Yin worriedly. Now, our Great Yin Dynasty can only activate our final trump card. Upon hearing Murong Li's words, a look of helplessness appeared on the face of the fifth ancestor of Great Yin, and he spoke slowly to Murong Li. Does our Great Yin Dynasty still have a trump card? Murong Li sighed in relief upon hearing his old ancestor's words, then asked the fifth ancestor of Great Yin with some confusion. Our Great Yin Dynasty naturally still has a trump card. However, this trump card is not activated unless the state faces a crisis of annihilation. Therefore, none of your generations of emperors knew about this matter. Only the ancestral land guardians of the Great Yin Dynasty know. The fifth ancestor of Great Yin spoke slowly after hearing Murong Li's words, and he seemed to sink into recollection, his eyes filled with longing. Murong Zhantian, the first monarch of our great Yin dynasty, did not fall. He merely sealed himself within the ancestral land. Only when the imperial dynasty truly faces a catastrophe will the old ancestor be summoned from the seal. The fifth ancestor of great Yin slowly explained, and as he spoke of Murong Zhantian, his eyes were filled with intense reverence. War Heaven old ancestor did not fall. Murong only froze upon hearing this news. He never imagined that his old ancestor, who was supposed to have fallen thousands of years ago, was still alive. That's right. Now you know why our great Yin dynasty has always lacked a first ancestor position. It is because War Heaven old ancestor Murong Zhantian is the first ancestor of the great Yin dynasty. The fifth ancestor of great Yin spoke irritably to the stunned Murong Li. So the first ancestor of my Murong clan is War Heaven old ancestor Murong Zhantian. After hearing the fifth ancestor of great Yan's words, Murong Li finally reacted. He naturally knew about the old ancestors of great Yin. But even including the 3 old ancestors who had just fallen, the first ancestor had never appeared. Murong Li had thought their first ancestor had fallen long ago, but he never expected the first ancestor to be Murong Zhantian, the founding monarch of the great Yin dynasty. Murong Zhantian was no simple figure. During the chaotic period in the Eastern Domain, Murong Zhantian stepped forward and founded the great Yin dynasty. One must know that the Eastern Domain at that time had not entered the era of spiritual qi depletion, so there were quite a few King Realm cultivators during that era. But even so, Murong Zhantian relied on his own strength to found the great Yin dynasty during this era filled with powerful experts, which is why the great Yin dynasty has been so stable. Of course, Chu Fan's Chu clan also followed Murong Zhantian in founding the great Yin dynasty, and the Chu clan served as generals for generations. This situation was only broken by the appearance of Chu Long. It could be said that if it weren't for Chu Long, then Chu Fan would currently be a young general of the great Yin dynasty, and the great Yin dynasty would not be so wary of the Chu clan. When Murong Li learned that his old ancestor Murong Zhantian was still alive, an excited expression appeared on his face. If this old ancestor was truly still alive, then his cultivation level must have reached an unbelievable stage. Because thousands of years ago, his old ancestor's cultivation had already reached the king completion realm. Now, he must have broken through past the king realm. The old ancestor will not appear until the critical moment. We will summon the old ancestor when the army of the Prince of Jinbei's estate arrives at the imperial capital. The fifth ancestor of Great Yin spoke slowly while looking at Murong Li. If the great Yin dynasty were not about to be annihilated, he would not have told Murong Li the news that Murong Zhantian was still alive. Chapter 160 True King Li Yuanba, besieging the capital of Great Yin. Murong Li also nodded helplessly after hearing his fifth old ancestor's words. Although he now knew that his founding old ancestor was still alive, the fifth old ancestor had not told him how to summon his founding old ancestor, so he naturally could only wait for the fifth old ancestor to summon that old ancestor. As the Murong imperial family gathered most of its army in the imperial capital of Great Yin, Chu Fan's army significantly increased its speed. In just 1 month, Chu Fan's army directly pushed to the imperial capital of Great Yin. At this time, armies from all 4 directions surrounded the imperial capital of Great Yin. The army of Chu Fan and others reached an astonishing 2 million, having captured many cities in that month. However, this did not cause significant losses to his army, and in that month, the armies of many cities also supplemented his forces. Ahead is the imperial capital of Great Yin. As long as this last city is taken, the entire Great Yin will fall into the hands of my Prince of Jinbei's estate. Chu Fan looked at the majestic city before him, a glint of light in his eyes. As long as he took this city, he could completely conquer the entire Great Yin dynasty. The imperial capital of Great Yin was much more majestic than other cities. Even Suzhou city of the Prince of Jinbei's estate seemed insignificant compared to the imperial capital of Great Yin. This was the ancestral land of the Great Yin dynasty, passed down for thousands of years. Young master, let me smash it open with one blow. No sooner had Chu Fan finished speaking than a thin man beside him excitedly looked at the city gate and spoke. However, he carried 2 huge iron hammers on his shoulders, making him look quite comical. Yuanba, there's no hurry now. Wait until the army has rested, then you can go and smash it open. Chu Fan looked at the thin man before him and said leisurely. A smile also appeared on Chu Fan's face as he looked at the man. This thin man was Li Yuanba, the person Chu Fan had summoned this month, and his cultivation had far surpassed the king realm, reaching the true king realm. It could be said that this man was Chu Fan's trump card. This man was Li Yuanba from the Sui and Tang world, the same Li Yuanba who had killed Yuan Qingdu in a few moves in the Sui and Tang world. The summoned Li Yuanba's cultivation reached the middle true king realm. It could be said that with Li Yuanba, Chu Fan could walk freely across the entire eastern region. Yuanba obeys. Li Yuanba chuckled after hearing Chu Fan's words, then glanced at Yuan Qingdu beside him. Yuan Qingdu also unleashed his battle intent when he saw Li Yuanba's gaze. Chu Fan was somewhat helpless seeing this scene. He didn't know why Li Yuanba and Yuan Qingdu were so incompatible. Although Li Yuanba and Yuan Qingdu were enemies in the Sui and Tang world, the summoned versions of them did not have memories from the Sui and Tang world. Young master, tomorrow we can launch a full-scale attack on the imperial capital. Guo Zhao looked at the imperial capital of Great Yan, a smile on his face, and slowly spoke to Chu Fan. Indeed, tomorrow we will engage in the final decisive battle with the Great Yan dynasty. By then, the entire world will belong to my prince of Zhenbei's estate. Chu Fan naturally understood Guo Zhia's meaning, so a smile also appeared on his lips as he spoke leisurely. At this time, Chu Fan also knew that there were still over 1 million troops in the imperial capital. With the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard, it was impossible for him not to know this. However, merely 1 million troops seemed insufficient in his presence. This time, Chu Fan had brought an army of over 2 million, not to mention that he also had Li Yuanba, who was in the true king realm, and several individuals in the king realm. As for experts in the Dharma aspect realm, they were countless. Ouyang Tian and Yang Tianzhan, who were behind Chu Fan, also looked excitedly at the imperial capital ahead. They had not expected this day to come so quickly. At the same time, the worries in Ouyang Tian and Yang Tianzhan's eyes had completely dissipated. Initially, they might have worried that the prince of Zhenbei's estate could not defeat the Great Yan dynasty, but now there was no longer any worry in their hearts. Because the strength of the prince of Zhenbei's estate had far exceeded their imagination, and now it had even surrounded the entire Great Yan dynasty. Meanwhile, the cultivators and common people in the imperial capital were all in a state of panic. They had not expected that Chu Fan, the heir of the prince of Zhenbei's estate, would attack the imperial capital so quickly. At the same time, the news that over 2 million troops were besieging the entire imperial capital had spread throughout the imperial capital. Will the imperial capital really fall into the hands of the prince of Zhenbei's estate? A cultivator looked at the sky with a solemn expression. At this moment, he seemed to see the imperial capital reduced to ruins. However, a hint of unwillingness could be seen in his eyes. The army of the prince of Zhenbei's estate is no longer something ordinary people can resist. After all, Chu Fan has many unimaginably powerful cultivators by his side. Another cultivator also looked at the city gate with emotion. At this moment, he was constantly pondering, clearly thinking about how to deal with the army of the prince of Zhenbei's estate. Although they were cultivators and stronger than ordinary armies, the army of the prince of Zhenbei's estate was known for its might, not to mention that there were now over 2 million army of the prince of Zhenbei's estate outside. Even if they didn't consider these 2 million army of the prince of Zhenbei's estate, they would still need to consider the powerful individuals around Chu Fan, the heir of the prince of Zhenbei's estate. I wonder how your majesty plans to resist the prince of Zhenbei's estate's attack. Another cultivator looked worriedly in the direction of the imperial palace. At this time, the only ones who could contend with the prince of Zhenbei's estate were the Murong imperial family of the Great Yan dynasty, and they were their only hope. But now, they were unsure if the Murong imperial family could defeat the prince of Zhenbei's estate. After all, the strength of the Murong imperial family was not particularly powerful. Of course, this phenomenon only appeared after the strength of the prince of Zhenbei's estate was revealed. Otherwise, how could the Murong imperial family's strength be weak? After all, the Murong imperial family was the master of one of the 4 great dynasties in the eastern region. It was simply because the strength displayed by the prince of Zhenbei's estate during this period was too formidable, which made everyone feel that the Murong imperial family's strength was not particularly strong. Your Majesty should be planning to fight to the death with the prince of Zhenbei's estate now. After all, under these circumstances, your Majesty cannot retreat. After hearing this cultivator's words, another cultivator also slowly looked in the direction of the imperial palace, but his eyes were filled with mysterious glints. Clearly, this person was not loyal to the Murong imperial family. Chapter 161, The Murong Royal Family's Plans. Murong, Zhantian awakens. Just as the entire imperial capital fell into panic, Murong Li, who knew the imperial capital was besieged, did not show much alarm in his eyes, because he knew that his founding emperor was still alive. This also meant that the Murong imperial family might not lose this great war. In fact, it could be said that the ultimate victor of this great war would be the Great Yan imperial family. After all, a powerhouse suspected to be in the true king realm could still kill Chu Fan amidst an army of thousands. Fifth ancestor, the prince of Zhenbei's estate's army has now surrounded the entire imperial capital. Shouldn't we awaken war, heaven, old ancestor? Murong Li slowly said to the fifth ancestor in front of him, his eyes filled with anticipation. At this moment, he seemed to have already envisioned War Heaven Old Ancestor slaying Chu Fan. Alas, follow me. The fifth ancestor of Great Yin sighed and said to Murong Li, his eyes filled with boundless desolation. Others might not know Murong Zhantian's condition, but he naturally did. If Murong Zhantian were forcibly awakened, his lifespan would be greatly shortened, and no matter what, Murong Zhantian was their Murong imperial family's ultimate trump card. The fifth ancestor truly did not want to awaken Murong Zhantian unless absolutely necessary. Afterward, Murong Li and the fifth ancestor continued along the quiet passage of the ancestral land, heading downwards. There were no lights around the passage, making it look very gloomy. With every step, Murong Li felt a boundless chill assailing him. It was as if the area below was an ice cave. After an unknown period, Murong Li and the fifth ancestor of Great Yin appeared in a secret chamber. The chamber was surrounded by thick walls, and many glaciers hung on them. It looked just like an ice cellar. Murong Li looked at the empty ice room, a trace of surprise appearing in his eyes, along with a hint of anticipation on his face. The fifth ancestor of Great Yin slowly bowed to the ice room ahead. Then he cut his palm. Blood flowed from his palm, gathering on the ground to form a pattern. As this pattern slowly appeared before the two of them, flashes of light constantly flickered on the pattern formed by blood, while the surrounding cold qi continuously absorbed the blood-formed pattern. As the cold qi continuously absorbed the blood, a terrifying and heavy aura spread over the two of them, and then a secret door appeared on the empty ground. Murong Li was also shocked by this scene. He had not expected his War Heaven Old Ancestor to be sealed here. Just then, the fifth ancestor of Great Yin took out a blood jade from his huai, and the next second he slowly inserted this blood jade into the secret door. Then, the entire crypt began to shake violently, and the secret door below slowly opened. Subsequently, an ice coffin slowly rose from within the secret door, and the moment the ice coffin ascended, a terrifying cold instantly enveloped the entire secret chamber. At this moment, Murong Li also saw the majestic figure within the ice coffin. Is this War Heaven Old Ancestor? Just a wisp of his aura makes me feel incredibly shocked. Looking at the majestic figure inside the ice coffin, a look of excitement appeared on Murong Li's face, and then he stared intently at the figure inside the ice coffin. Give me the imperial seal. The fifth ancestor of Great Yin, with a solemn expression, said to Murong Li. Upon hearing the fifth ancestor of Great Yin, Murong Li quickly handed over his imperial seal. After receiving the imperial seal, the fifth ancestor of Great Yin guided the blood from his hand into the imperial seal, then slowly lifted the imperial seal and gently placed it on the ice coffin. A powerful aura emanated from the imperial seal, and the ice coffin, which had been sealed for an unknown duration, slowly opened at this moment. The majestic figure within the ice coffin now also exuded a terrifying aura, and his body continuously absorbed the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual qi. After a while, the majestic figure inside the ice coffin slowly opened his eyes, which were filled with a sense of vicissitude, as if countless epochs had passed. Has my Murong imperial family reached a point of life and death? At the same time, his ancient voice slowly echoed in the ears of Murong Li and the other person. That ancient voice was also filled with majesty, as if he were a true earthly emperor. Murong imperial family's 374th imperial lord greets Old Ancestor. At this moment, only the imperial capital remains of my Great Yin imperial dynasty's territory, which is why Old Ancestor has been awakened to slay the enemy. Murong Li quickly stepped forward and said to the ice coffin in front of him, his words filled with anger. Which force is attacking my Great Yin imperial dynasty? Murong Zhantian was somewhat surprised after hearing Murong Li's words. He had not expected the Great Yin imperial dynasty to have fallen to such a state. It is the Prince of Junbei's estate of my Great Yin. Chu Fan has many experts by his side, and over the years, the Prince of Junbei's estate has also cultivated many armies, which is why my Great Yin imperial dynasty has been unable to resist their attacks. Murong Li continued to speak after hearing his old ancestor's inquiry. When mentioning Chu Fan's name, Murong Li gnashed his teeth. After all, he had once been tormented by Chu Fan to the point of wishing he were dead. Prince of Junbei's estate, Murong Zhantian asked with some confusion after hearing Murong Li's words, and he also felt very surprised. Old Ancestor, the ancestors of the Prince of Junbei's estate are descendants of General Chu An, who fought alongside Old Ancestor. The fifth ancestor of Great Yin naturally knew at this moment that his old ancestor was unaware of the Prince of Junbei's estate's existence. His old ancestor had been sealed for thousands of years, so how could he know what had happened in the past few decades? So, They're descendants of Chu and I? The Chu family should be very loyal to our Murong imperial family for generations. Why has it become like this now? Murong Zhantian frowned after hearing the fifth ancestor of Great Yan's words, and his tone was filled with a hint of surprise. Because our Murong imperial family caused their prince of Junbei's estate to become extinct, that's why the prince of Junbei's estate resisted. The fifth ancestor of Great Yan revealed Murong Li's little scheme without any reservation. Upon hearing the fifth ancestor of Great Yan's words, Murong Li immediately lowered his head. At this moment, he dared not look up at Murong Zhantian. So that's how it is. However, even so, the Chu family should not have rebelled against my Murong imperial family. Murong Zhantian instantly understood after hearing the fifth ancestor of Great Yan's words, and then he spoke with a domineering tone. Chapter 162 Murong Zhantian at the True King Realm, Li Yuanba's confidence. Although the Murong imperial family was in the wrong, Murong Zhantian believed that as subjects, they should not resist. Murong Li breathed a sigh of relief after hearing Murong Zhantian's words, as he had been afraid Murong Zhantian would blame him. Old ancestor, the prince of Junbei's estate killed several old ancestors of our Murong imperial family. Now, only the fifth ancestor of Great Yan remains among our Murong imperial family's old ancestors. Murong Li slowly stepped forward and spoke to Murong Zhantian, a hint of coldness in his eyes. He wished Chu Fan would die immediately, which was why he resented Chu Fan so much at this moment. They cultivated the cultivation technique I left behind, so their cultivation should have at least reached the king realm, right? How could they have fallen so easily? Murong Zhantian frowned upon hearing Murong Li's words, then looked at Murong Li with a puzzled expression and asked. Although he didn't know what realm those few had reached, the cultivation technique he left behind could allow them to cultivate to the king realm. Yet, they still fell, which indicated that the prince of Junbei's estate's strength was not weak. Old ancestor, the prince of Junbei's estate should have several king realm existences. After all, the second ancestor's cultivation had reached the middle king realm, but even so, he fell into the hands of the prince of Junbei's estate. From this, it can be seen that the prince of Junbei's estate has at least an existence above the middle king realm. The fifth ancestor of Great Yan slowly stepped forward, cupped his hands to Murong Zhantian, and spoke, also conveying his speculation to Murong Zhantian. So that's how it is. I didn't expect the descendants of the former Chu and I to have such a prodigy among them. However, since they have offended our Murong imperial family, they shall perish. Murong Zhantian was somewhat surprised upon hearing the fifth ancestor of Great Yan's words. He hadn't expected the prince of Junbei's estate to still have king realm existences. However, even if the prince of Junbei's estate had king realm existences, they posed no great threat to him. After all, his current cultivation had already surpassed the king realm. Has old ancestors' current cultivation surpassed the king realm? Murong Li was excited upon hearing Murong Zhantian's words, then cautiously asked Murong Zhantian. That's right. I gained a blessing in disguise and entered the true king realm, adding 1,000 years to my lifespan. Murong Zhantian said with a smile upon hearing Murong Li's words. Originally, when he was in Seal, he was only at the half-step true king realm, but he hadn't expected that 1,000 years in Seal would allow him to enter the true king realm. After entering the true king realm, his lifespan increased by another 1,000 years. From now on, he wouldn't need to enter the Seal again for the next 1,000 years. The fifth ancestor of Great Yan and Murong Li both showed excited expressions upon hearing Murong Zhantian's words. Initially, they were afraid that their old ancestor would have to return to Seal due to insufficient lifespan. But now, their old ancestor's lifespan had increased by 1,000 years. From this, it could be seen that their Great Yan imperial dynasty would no longer need to fear any force. Of course, they wouldn't need to fear the forces of the Eastern Domain. Afterward, Murong Zhantian and Murong Li discussed how to deal with the prince of Junbei's estate, then concluded their conversation for the day. However, what they didn't know was that the moment Murong Zhantian was unsealed, his chi was sensed by Li Yuanba, who was beside Chu Fan. Your Highness, there's a true king initial stage cultivator in the imperial capital, and he seems to have just been unsealed from something. Li Yuanba, beside Chu Fan, scratched his head and spoke to Chu Fan, a simple and honest smile on his face. Yuanba, you mean there's a true king realm cultivator in the imperial capital, and he just unsealed from slumber? Chu Fan, who had been smiling, instantly froze upon hearing Li Yuanba's words. He didn't think Li Yuanba would lie to him. Even Guojia, standing beside Chu Fan, frowned upon hearing this news. Your Highness, it seems there's still one old ancestor from the Murong imperial family who hasn't appeared. Just then, Guojia suddenly seemed to remember something, then looked at Chu Fan seriously and spoke. You mean the first ancestor of Great Yan? Chu Fan also suddenly remembered something after Guo Jia's reminder, then looked in Guo Jia's direction and said solemnly, "Your Highness is right. The first ancestor of Great Yin has never appeared. Perhaps he is this true King Realm cultivator." Guo Jia nodded upon hearing Chu Fan's words, then gazed towards the imperial capital and said, "It seems it really must be him. After all, whose cultivation is so powerful. Yuanba, do you have confidence in dealing with him?" Chu Fan also confirmed at this moment that this should be the strongest old ancestor of Great Yin, but he still had full confidence in Li Yuanba beside him. After all, Li Yuanba's cultivation had reached the middle true king realm, while that old ancestor of Great Yin's cultivation was only at the true king initial stage. "Your Highness, Yuanba only needs 10 moves to defeat him." Li Yuanba was triumphant upon hearing Chu Fan's words. He glanced triumphantly at Yuan Qingdu, then spoke earnestly to Chu Fan. "Ha! Since Yuanba can easily defeat him, why should we fear him?" Chu Fan also burst into laughter upon hearing Li Yuanba's words. Although a variable had appeared in the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty, this variable was still within his control. Chu Fan naturally wouldn't have too many scruples. Yang Tianzhan and Ouyang Tian also breathed a sigh of relief after hearing the conversation between Chu Fan and Li Yuanba. After all, they were also initially worried about whether their side could defeat that old ancestor of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty. I wonder who this first ancestor of Great Yin is. Then, Chu Fan gazed towards the imperial capital again, a look of confusion on his face. "Your Highness, this first ancestor of Great Yin might be the founding emperor of Great Yin, Murong Zhantian." Upon hearing Chu Fan's puzzled voice, Yang Tianzhan slowly stepped forward and spoke, though a hint of hesitation was on his face, clearly indicating he wasn't entirely sure himself. "Oh, if it's Murong Zhantian, then wouldn't he have lived for thousands of years?" Chu Fan had naturally heard of the legend of Murong Zhantian, so he slowly looked at Yang Tianzhan in front of him and spoke. "Reporting to your Highness, I once heard that this founding old ancestor of the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty left the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty at the end of his life. At that time, his cultivation had already reached the king completion realm." Yang Tianzhan slowly stepped forward again and spoke to Chu Fan, but he only recounted the former legend of this founding emperor of Great Yin. Chapter 163 On the eve of the decisive battle, Murong Li's terror. However, even after learning that this expert, who surpassed the king realm, was Murong Zhantian, the founding monarch of the Great Yin Dynasty, there was no great concern on his face. "So, it's him? I was wondering how the Great Yin Dynasty could possess a true king realm existence." Chu Fan also reacted after hearing Yang Tianzhan's words. "A cultivator who breaks through to the king realm can live for 1,000 years, and if they break through to the true king realm, they can live for 3,000 years. Therefore, it was completely normal for Murong Zhantian to live for several thousand years. At this time, Murong Zhantian's breakthrough from the king realm to the true king realm only increased his lifespan by 1,000 years. The main reason was that he had consumed his vitality within the seal, which is why his increased lifespan was 1,000 years instead of 2,000. Although the Great Yin Dynasty now has an added variable, they have no chance of turning the tables under the young master's command." Guo Jia smiled leisurely as he stepped forward after hearing Chu Fan's words. He wasn't too shocked that the Great Yin Dynasty had gained a true king realm expert. Moreover, his side also had a true king realm expert, and one who could completely overwhelm that other existence. "Yes, after tomorrow, the entire Great Yin Dynasty will fall into my hands." After hearing Guo Jia's words, Chu Fan looked leisurely in the direction of the imperial capital. At this moment, he seemed to see himself ruling the world. The others, hearing their conversation, also looked towards the imperial capital with longing eyes, as they too anticipated the entire imperial capital falling into the Prince of Zhenbei's estate's hands after tomorrow. They would then be the victors of this great war. One could say they would be the creators of a new nation. Time thus slipped away leisurely amidst everyone's anticipation, and in a blink, the sunlight of the second day arrived. As the morning sun shone upon the continent, Chu Fan also rose early today. At this moment, he had changed his usual style. He wore a bright silver armor, held a silver spear in his hand, and had a long sword hanging at his waist. He looked like a true heavenly god descended to the mortal realm. A faint, elusive smile always hung on his handsome face. Beside him were Li Yuanba, wielding his twin hammers, and Yuan Qingdu, holding his phoenix-winged gold-plated halberd. Beside Li Yuanba and Yuan Qingdu were Qin Jibao and others. The entire army of the Prince of Zhenbei's estate was now lined up, and all generals who had reached the spirit-roaming realm and above stood at the front, forming a terrifying aura. Soon, Chu Fan's army appeared below the imperial capital city walls. Upon arriving, Chu Fan saw Murong Li on the city walls. At this moment, Murong Li on the city walls naturally also saw Chu Fan, and his eyes were filled with ruthlessness, as if he wanted to tear Chu Fan into a million pieces at any moment. Chu Fan paid no attention to Murong Li's sinister gaze. Instead, he leisurely shifted his attention to the old man beside Murong Li. Chu Fan only glanced at the old man, but immediately felt a terrifying pressure. Even he, who had already reached the perfected Dharma aspect realm, almost couldn't withstand this pressure. However, Li Yuanba, who was beside him, apparently also noticed Chu Fan's situation. He slowly took a step forward. An even more terrifying aura emanated from Li Yuanba, instantly causing Murong Zhantian on the city walls to involuntarily take half a step back. A true King Realm expert. I never thought that the small prince of Jinbei's estate would actually have a true King Realm existence. After taking half a step back, Murong Zhantian looked at the thin man below with disbelief. He hadn't expected this thin man to also be a true King Realm existence. Subsequently, his gaze towards Li Yuanba was filled with apprehension. Old ancestor, is that person below truly a true King Realm existence? Murong Li and the others naturally heard Murong Zhantian's words. Murong Li looked at Li Yuanba below with a dazed expression and asked Murong Zhantian in disbelief. Indeed, I didn't expect this small prince of Jinbei's estate to possess a true King Realm existence. It seems this great war will be extremely difficult. Murong Zhantian also recovered his senses at this moment, then looked at Li Yuanba and the others below with a solemn expression and said, "Moreover, I didn't expect their camp to also have 4 King Realm existences. Does heaven truly not assist my Murong imperial family?" Murong Zhantian then looked at Yuan Qingdu and the others. He hadn't expected Chu Fan to have 4 King Realm existences by his side. One must know that the current Murong imperial family, apart from him, only had 1 remaining King Realm existence, and this King Realm existence was only at the early stage king. Wanting to simultaneously deal with the 4 King Realm existences below was simply wishful thinking. More importantly, Murong Zhantian felt a faint, elusive threat from Chen Jibao. From this, he knew that today, the Murong imperial family might truly disappear into the river of history. Upon hearing Murong Zhantian's words, a look of terror instantly appeared on Murong Li's face. He hadn't expected his greatest hope to say such words, and 4 King Realm existences were not something they could withstand. "You are Chu Fan. I never expected that Chu and I, who once followed me, would have such a heaven-defying descendant like you." Murong Zhantian paid no attention to Murong Li beside him. Instead, he slowly stepped forward and spoke to Chu Fan below. Although he was speaking words of admiration for Chu Fan, his words carried killing intent. This young master also didn't expect the famous founding emperor of Great Yin, Murong Zhantian, to still be alive. After hearing Murong Zhantian's words, Chu Fan slowly stepped forward and spoke to Murong Zhantian. At the same time, Chu Fan's eyes were filled with curiosity as he looked at Murong Zhantian on the city wall. After all, no matter what, this person was once the protagonist of a chaotic era, establishing the entire Great Yin dynasty with his own strength. "Chu Fan, if you retreat now, this senior will let bygones be bygones out of consideration for Chuni's face. But if you still wish to continue this entanglement, then this senior will kill you first." Murong Zhantian looked at the spirited young man below and couldn't help but recall his own past in his mind. He then stepped forward and loudly spoke in Chu Fan's direction. "You, with your capabilities, want to kill this young master?" Chu Fan scoffed after hearing Murong Zhantian's words, then looked at Murong Zhantian on the city wall with disdain in his eyes. The moment Chu Fan's words fell, Li Yuanba, who was beside him, seemed to know his intention. He slowly took a step forward, and a terrifying aura emanated from his body. Chapter 164 Murong Zhantian battles Li Yuanba, the Great Yin National Protection Formation. A terrifying aura directly assaulted Murong Zhantian. Feeling the terrifying aura emanating from Li Yuanba, Murong Zhantian frowned, then slowly glanced at Murong Li beside him. A battle in the sky. The next second, he vanished from his spot, and then his voice echoed from above. After hearing this voice, an excited expression appeared on Li Yuanba's face, but he still looked at the clone beside him. "Go on, this young master believes you can kill him." Chu Fan naturally saw the excitement in Li Yuanba's eyes, so he patted Li Yuanba's shoulder and said to him, "Please rest assured, young master, Yuanba will definitely deal with him." A smile appeared on Li Yuanba's face after hearing Chu Fan's words, and then he eagerly disappeared between heaven and earth, holding the hammer in his hand. As Li Yuanba vanished, sounds of clashing weapons suddenly emanated from above, and the terrifying aura pressed down on the crowd below, almost suffocating them. "Murong Li, no one can protect you now. Chu Fan slowly walked forward, looking at Murong Li on the city wall, and spoke mockingly, his contempt undisguised. Chu Fan, I regret not killing you and your brother when you were young. That's why you grew so strong. Murong Li looked at Chu Fan in front of him, his eyes filled with killing intent. He had never expected that the second young master of the Prince of Junbei's estate, whom he had never taken seriously, would grow to such an extent. If he had known Chu Fan could grow to this point, Murong Li would have absolutely strangled Chu Fan in his cradle. Murong Li, anyone can boast, but no matter what, today is your day to die. Chu Fan naturally knew what Murong Li meant, so he slowly looked at Murong Li and spoke. After speaking, he no longer intended to bother with Murong Li, instead waving his hand at Chun Jibao and others beside him. Upon seeing Chu Fan wave at him, Chun Jibao understood it was his turn to act, so he slowly walked out, holding his long spear. At this moment, he made no attempt to conceal the aura around him. The aura of the King Completion realm instantly filled the entire world. Activate the Nation-Protecting Formation. I refuse to believe they can break through the Nation-Protecting Formation so easily. The fifth ancestor of Great Yin looked at Chun Jibao, who was continuously approaching the imperial capital, and spoke helplessly. As his words fell, the imperial seal in Murong Li's hand slowly rose into the air. As the imperial seal ascended, a light shield appeared over the imperial capital, enveloping the entire imperial capital. Chun Jibao, who was advancing, naturally felt this repulsive force, so he frowned, then thrust his long spear with a boom at the light shield in front of him. A terrifying power directly swept across the entire world. Then, this spear directly struck the light shield in front of him. But the next second, something astonishing happened. Chun Jibao, who possessed the King Realm, could not break the formation in front of him with that spear. One could even say that the formation in front of him didn't even show a crack. It merely made the entire earth tremble. Ha! How could the nation-protecting formation of my Great Yin Dynasty be broken so easily? Murong Li, who had been very worried, burst into arrogant laughter upon seeing this scene, his eyes full of provocation as he looked towards Chu Fan. At this moment, he seemed to have won this great battle. The other generals and powerful individuals of the Great Yin Dynasty also breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the Prince of Junbei's estate could not break through the nation-protecting formation, it would be fine. Even if I can't break your so-called formation, what then? After all, you can't possibly keep cowering in the imperial capital, can you? After hearing Murong Li's words, Chu Fan looked at Murong Li on the city wall as if he were an idiot. Even if they couldn't break the imperial capital's nation-protecting formation, it wouldn't be too detrimental to them. After all, Murong Li couldn't always cower in the imperial capital, not to mention the power required for the nation-protecting formation. Simply put, Murong Li and the others would not be able to endure being constantly protected by the formation within the imperial city. Although they were currently protected by the formation, from another perspective, wasn't the formation also trapping them within it? One could say that Murong Li and the others were now lambs to the slaughter, only able to live within the imperial capital. Moreover, who said this young master doesn't have a way to break the formation? After Chu Fan finished speaking, he leisurely added, then he didn't even bother to look at Murong Li, slowly walking to Guijia's side. Murong Li, whose face had been full of smiles, instantly froze after hearing Chu Fan's words. Because at this moment, he also understood the meaning of Chu Fan's words just now, and at the same time, he clearly saw his current predicament. Then, the smile on his face instantly turned into a sinister expression, and his entire face was filled with fury. And the fifth ancestor of the Great Yin Dynasty sighed helplessly, then leisurely looked up at the sky. Although he couldn't clearly see the great battle in the sky at this moment, he still prayed that his old ancestor could win this great battle. Guijia's courtesy name. Have you found a way to break the formation? On the other side, Chu Fan also came to Guijia's side and asked him. Chu Fan believed that Guijia could find a way to break the formation. The others also looked at Guijia with anticipation after hearing Chu Fan's words. I have found the key to breaking the formation. To break this formation, the power of the true King Realm is required, and even ordinary true King Realm power cannot break it. That is why General Chun Jibao failed to break this formation. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Guijia leisurely looked at the light shield on the city wall, then slowly began to explain. Chu Fan and the generals present also understood after hearing Guijia's words. So that's how it is? Then how should we break it now? After Chu Fan understood what was happening, he slowly turned his gaze to the city wall again, his voice full of doubt as he asked Guijia. Breaking this formation is very simple. All the generals need to do is stand in the positions of the 28 mansions, and then transfer all the power within their bodies to General Chun Jibao's body. and this formation can be broken. After hearing Chu Fan's words, Zhao slowly stepped forward, pointed at Chen Jibao in front, and said, a barely perceptible smile on his face. Zhao was completely confident that he could break this formation.